today, popular.info. The average American family last year in 2020 paid an effective tax rate of 13.6%. That's average, right? Some people paying.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can enter tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Settlers, the Mythology of the White Proletariat, the True Story of the White Nation by J. Sakai, published by Morningstar Press in 1989. This is from Chapter 2, The Foundations of Settler Life. The life of European settlers and the class structure of their society was abnormal because it was dependent upon a foundation of conquest, genocide, and enslavement. The myth of the self-sufficient white settler family clearing the wilderness and supporting themselves through their own initiative and hard labor is a propaganda fabrication. It is the absolute characteristic of settler society to be parasitic, dependent upon the super-exploitation of oppressed peoples for its style of life. Never has Euro-American society completely supported itself. This is the decisive factor in the consciousness of all classes and strata of white society from 1600 to now. Settler society was raised up above the level of backward old Europe by a foundation of conquest. This conquest was a miracle drug for a Europe convulsed with the reaction of decaying feudalism and deadly capitalism. Shot into the veins of the Spanish feudal nation, for instance, the miracle drug of the New World conquest gave Spain the momentary power to overrun North Africa, Holland, and Italy before her historical incident waned. Like many such fixes for Euro-Americans, this conquest was addicting. It was habit-forming and rapidly indispensable, not only culturally, but in the mechanism of an oppressor society whose lifeblood was new conquest. We'll examine this later in the relationship of settlerism to imperialism. For now, it's enough to see that this conquest is a material act of great magnitude, an economic and social event as important as the emergence of the factory system or the exploitation of petroleum in the Middle East. We stress the obvious here because the Euro-American settlers have always made light of their invasion and occupation, although the conquered territory is the precondition for their whole society. Traditionally, European settler societies throw off the propaganda smoke screens that they didn't really and dispossess other nations. They claim with false modesty that they merely moved into vacant territory. So the early English settlers depicted America as empty, a howling wilderness, unsettled, sparsely populated, just waiting with a vacant sign on the door for the first lucky civilization to walk in and claim it. Theodore Roosevelt wrote defensively in 1900, quote, "The settler and pioneer have at bottom had justice on their side. This great continent could not have been kept as nothing but a game preserve for squalid savages," end of quote. It is telling that this lie is precisely the same lie put forward by white Afrikaner settlers who claimed that South Africa was literally totally uninhabited by any Africans when they arrived from Europe. To universal derision, these European settlers claimed to be the only rightful historic inhabitants of South Africa. Or we can hear similar defenses put forward by the European settlers of Israel, who claim that much of the Palestinian land and buildings they occupy are rightfully theirs, since the Arabs had allegedly decided to voluntarily abandon it all during the 1948-49 war. Are these kinds of tales any less preposterous than those put forward by Euro-American settlers? America was spacious and sparsely populated only because the European invaders destroyed whole civilizations and killed off millions of Native Americans to get the land and profits they wanted. We all know that when the English arrived at Virginia, for example, they encountered an urban, village-dwelling society far more skilled than they were in the arts of medicine, agriculture, fishing, and government. This civilization was reflected in a chain of 300 Indian nations and peoples stretching from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America, many of whom had highly developed societies. There was, in fact, a greater population in these Indian nations in 1492 than in all of Western Europe. Recent scholarly estimates indicate that at the time of Columbus, there were 100 million Indians in the hemisphere, 10 million in North America, 25 million in Central Mexico, and an additional 65 million elsewhere in Central and South America. These numbers have long been concealed since they give rise to the logical question of what happened to this great mass of people. The European invaders, Spanish, Dutch, English, Portuguese, and French, simply killed off millions and millions to safeguard their conquest of the land and provide the disposable slave labor they needed to launch their new world. Conservative Western historical estimates show that the Spanish reduced, in quotes, the Indian population of their colonies from some 50 million to only 4 million by the end of the 17th century. And from the 10 million Indians who once inhabited North America, after 4 centuries of settler invasion and rule, there were in 1900 perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 surviving descendants in the United States. This was the very substantial down payment towards the continuing blood price that third world nations have to pay to sustain the Euro-American way of life. So when we hear that the settlers pushed out the Indians or forced the Indians to leave their traditional hunting grounds, we know that these are just code phrases to refer politely to the most barbaric genocide imaginable. It could well be the greatest crime in all of human history. Only here, the Adolf Eichmanns and Heinrich Himmlers had names like Benjamin Franklin and Andrew Jackson. The point is that genocide was not an accident, not an excess, not the unintended side effect of the world.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday. TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It is the end of the week and the beginning of the weekend, and I hope it's a beautiful day for here. It's kind of a cold, rainy day here in Portland, which means that's probably coming your way. So get ready. In fact, they even said there might be a thunderstorm this afternoon. So it's weird. We get that kind of weather here, and then 3 days later, the Midwest is being ripped up by tornadoes. So just a heads up. So a lot to talk about today. It's just you and me all day, no guests, and of course it's anything goes weekend. So whatever you want to talk about is fine. But I want to start out in just a minute with my op-ed today, 14 Steps to Tyranny. You ever heard of autocratic breakthrough? Well, I'll describe that and how it works. Also, a little news summary. Are we going to regret Trump being able to use a nuclear weapon? He's now threatening that. And a court has backed Trump's National Guard's deployment to Los Angeles, a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit specifically. But be prepared for what comes next when the Guard arrives in blue cities. We'll talk about that in the first hour. Also, racist alert. Did Trump ever complain before about too many holidays? Why just Juneteenth? In the second hour of our program, look out. Retirees are being forced into privatized for-profit Medicare Advantage plans. Is this the future of Medicare? We'll talk about that. Also, will children born now live in a world where the U.S. can produce only half as much as its key food crops? A startling new prediction from a group of scientists. And in the third hour of our program, Kennedy and his anti-vaccine freaks were just caught lying to Congress again about COVID-19 vaccines. Just as a new variant has arrived, it's called the razor blade sore throat variant. Oh, my God. Amazing. Oh, and happy summer solstice. Today is the longest day of the year. Summer arrives this evening at 10:42 Eastern Time, 7:42 Pacific Time. And that's, like I said, also the longest day of the year. 14 Steps to Tyranny, Autocratic Breakthrough, and how it happens and what we can do about it. That's the title of my op-ed today at HartmannReport.com, my daily take. We have seen the Trump administration do a bunch of things that look pretty fascistic. You know, they've arrested a mayor, a judge, a member of Congress. They beat a United States senator to the ground. They've deployed the military over the objections of the governor and the mayor. We just experienced a political assassination. Kristi Noem says she's in Los Angeles to liberate the city. The president has a military parade for his birthday. The Trump regime is ignoring court orders, and his press secretary is saying the courts should have no role here. What does all this mean? Well, autocratic breakthrough is a phrase you're probably going to start hearing a lot about in the media. Autocratic breakthrough is a phrase that describes when the movement toward authoritarianism, toward dictatorship in a democratic country reaches the point where it's very, very difficult to stop, where the country is almost certainly going to become, or has already become, essentially or functionally a dictatorship. And the road or the path to autocratic breakthrough goes through 3 stages. We are currently in the middle of the 2nd stage. At the 1st and 2nd stage, autocratic breakthrough can be stopped, can even be reversed. Once it gets into the 3rd stage, and I'll get into that in just a moment, to stop autocratic breakthrough is almost impossible. It typically requires either a major crisis, like the Republican Great Depression of the 1930s, or a civil war, like the American Civil War of the 1860s. Now, we weren't at full autocratic breakthrough when we had the Republican Great Depression. We were really in the 1st stage in many ways during the Harding and Coolidge administrations in particular. Hoover wasn't quite so bad. But we were in major autocratic breakthrough in the period from 1820 to 1861 in the South. The South had become a full-blown autocracy, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But let's just go through these 3 stages of autocratic breakthrough. The 1st stage is called democratic erosion. Sometimes it's referred to as soft authoritarianism. And it's characterized by a couple of things. Number one, the demonization of political opponents. People start referring to other politicians rather than my friend across the aisle or my colleague or my respected opponent or those kind of things, my loyal opposition. They refer to them as enemies of the people or scum or parasites or traitors or terrorists, or say they hate the country. Number 2, this 1st stage is characterized by attacks on the press, claims that the media is fake news or the enemy of the people. Number 3, it's characterized by politicization of law enforcement entities. They get captured by the autocrat. They, in turn, target critics, protesters, civil society groups with surveillance and raids. We saw this against the civil rights movement, for example, back in the 60s. We're seeing that again. Number 4, the elevation of the executive above co-equal branches of government. We're seeing this right now with Trump declaring emergencies that give him power that can't be constrained by the courts or Congress. And number 5, election manipulation. The ruling party makes it progressively more and more difficult for their political opponents to vote. They gerrymander districts. Nonpartisan election officials are replaced by loyalists to the regime. So they can have an influence on elections. That's the 1st stage. As I said, democratic erosion. The 2nd stage is approaching democratic breakdown. And it includes these items: judicial capture, characterized first by the regime packing the courts with judges and going after lawyers. So judicial capture. Number 2, criminalization of the opposition. They begin by disqualifying or even prosecuting rival politicians on dubious charges and shutting down non-governmental organizations and nonprofits. They try to discredit political parties. This is where we're at right now, by the way. We're in the second stage. Number 8, militarization of domestic law enforcement. You see police agencies converted into something that looks like occupying armies. And number 9, the fusion of party and state. And this is a critical step in which open loyalty and fealty to the regime or the party becomes necessary just to get a job with the state. And government media becomes indistinguishable from party propaganda. Which leads us to stage 3, we're on the verge of, and this is called full autocratic breakthrough. And this is once you're in this stage, there's generally no going back without a crisis, as I mentioned at the beginning. This stage is characterized by abolition or nullification of meaningful elections. They suspend elections or they postpone them. They rig elections. The elections are characterized by intimidation, mass disinformation, falsified electoral counts. Number 11, loss of civil liberties, including freedom of assembly, speech, and movement. Number 12, constitutional overhaul or emergency rule. In other words, they rewrite the Constitution or they declare emergencies that allow them to ignore the Constitution. Number 13, exile, imprisonment, or assassination of the opposition, as key dissenters are forced into hiding. And finally, the strongman cult of personality replaces institutional legitimacy as the dear leader is elevated to be the embodiment of the nation and the will of the people. Now, all 14 of these stages happened in the Deep South in the period from 1820 to 1861. People opposed to slavery were routinely beaten, run out of town, even lynched. Talking about white men. Violence and intimidation were common tools to suppress dissent. Politicians who posed an actual threat to the oligarchs were bought off, prosecuted, or imprisoned. By the 1850s, early 1850s, all of the pro-democracy or anti-slavery newspapers in the South had been put out of business or shut down, and most of their writers or publishers had been put in prison. Elections were rigged. The right to vote was typically limited to white men who paid taxes. Religious leaders who refused to preach in support of slavery were got rid of. They were stripped of their right to have a congregation. And the mails were being inspected by Confederate police looking for people who might dissent. And this, led to the 1854 Kansas-Nebraska Act, which led to Bleeding Kansas, the sacking of Lawrence, and I won't go into the whole detail there. But basically, this was when the Confederacy emerged in the mid-1850s. And it provoked, John Brown's retaliation. And, finally Kansas entered the Union in 1859. And by 1861, we were in a full-blown civil war. That's how we stopped the autocratic breakthrough, was with a civil war. Now, we don't want to do it that way again. And that's why it's so critical that we all tell everybody about autocratic breakthrough, what it is, how it happens, where we are in the process. And of course, the way to stop the process is to stop the people who are driving the process. And you do that, you use the courts to the extent you can. You do that at the ballot box. But the principal weapon for doing that is waking people up, informing them about these things. I'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where smart people get their news. I'll be right back with more of the news of the day in your call. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Mike in Fresno, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I'm concerned about this bunker buster bomb that Trump wants to drop. If he's successful in hitting the underground bunker that's full of enriched uranium, is it possible that they could contaminate the groundwater?
Oh, not just the groundwater. I mean, it's not impossible that they contaminate the air. This is one of the big concerns, is that, bombing these facilities may well provoke a nuclear catastrophe. Hello?
Oh, my phone went blank. I thought you hung up.
Oh, no. I said it's entirely possible.
The one thing I can count on from Trump is he won't take responsibility for anything.
No, and I mean, it's weird. Which senator was it? I think it was I think it was Tom Tillis. Maybe not. Anyhow, one of the Republican senators. Oh, it was the senator. It was Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri. He just told a reporter yesterday that he talked to Trump, and Trump didn't know that there were Medicaid cuts in his so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. This is a sign that this guy is uninformed or out of touch or suffering dementia. I'm concerned that Trump is so far gone that he doesn't understand the consequences of dropping that bomb on Iran. So I share your concern, Mike, deeply. Mike, I got to move along. Thanks for the call. Nancy in Woodland, California. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'm calling in response to a caller from yesterday who was saying that he was glad to see that finally senior citizens were getting out and protesting during No Kings. And I'm calling to defend senior citizens because I am one. And I just want to say that my experience has been the opposite up here. I'm in Northern California near Sacramento. And the No Kings was really well attended, and it was the most we had a bowl, and it was the most diverse in every way that I've seen so far, because the hands off, and then there was another one, I can't remember which one, where it's mostly middle-aged and us senior citizens out there, and not as racially diverse as mostly white people. So I am just calling to defend our group, and
yeah. I
just found that an interesting comment, and it may seem minor, but it really got under my skin. So anyway, that was what I wanted to talk about.
Well, Louise and I went to the No Kings rally in Vancouver, Washington, which is right. We live right closer to Vancouver than to downtown Portland, so it's easier for us to just go there, and plus it's a smaller town. It's nice, and I would say 80% of the people there were over 50. And probably 70% were well over 60. On the other hand, to the one down in Portland, and they were like, it was filled with young people.
Well, that's good.
So I don't know what accounts for that, and it's possible. I mean, we didn't stay for the whole thing. We were only there for the first half hour or so. So it's possible that as time went on, more young people showed up. We had stopped in town for breakfast before the thing, so we could find a parking place. And our waitress, who was, in her maybe early 20s, we said, where's the park with the protest? It's right down the street here, right? And she was like, I think I've heard that there's a protest. I mean, she was clueless. So, which is kind of a sad commentary. But yeah, let's, yay boomers. Nancy, thanks for the call. 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at Hartmann Report. Read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, hartmannreport.com. So back in the 1980s, Louise and I lived in Germany for a year. And one of the stories that I remember hearing from some of the older people who were there in Stadtsteinach, who had been alive during the Hitler era, was that the radio and television stations, well, they didn't have television stations, but the radio stations and the newspapers back then had, on radio, it was a particular time of the day, and in newspapers, a particular part of the paper, where people could write in or people could call in and denounce their neighbors for being gay or for being disloyal or for being secretly Jewish. And that would then cause the neighbors to all go after them because it was a matter of public record. Now, anything states do in the United States is a matter of public record. The of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, has just put up a form on the government's website, the Transgender Concerns Form, where you can report your neighbors for dressing up as women. This is nuts. Check it out. There's a whole piece about it at tom.tv.
It starts with a whisper, a poison in the well. They call their foes traitors, say the free press fell. The strong man rises cloaked in the law, writing new orders, erasing what we saw. Courts are packed, the truth's on trial. Votes are stolen with a gerrymandered smile. An iron fist dressed up as decree, selling fear as security. It's not a march, it's a slide, every step justified. By the time you see the bars, you're trapped inside. Autocratic breakthrough, the glass is shattered now. We let them take it step by step and never ask them how. Autocratic breakthrough, the sirens fade away. Freedom bleeds in silence when the people look away. Judges bow down, the laws remade. Opposition silenced or locked away. The army's called in, but not for the fight. They're marching on protest, they're killing the light. Paramilitaries haunt the night. Dissent is branded terror blight. And in the mirror, the face we knew is gone beneath red, white, and blue. They say it's order, say it's peace, but what's the price for this disease? By the time the chains are tight, there's no release. Autocratic breakthrough, the glass is
24 and a half minutes past the hour. Welcome back. The White House said Thursday that Donald Trump, this was yesterday afternoon, that Donald Trump has not ruled out dropping a nuclear weapon on Iran. Now, keep in mind, Israel attacked Iran. It's like, wait a minute. U.S. intelligence has said Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon, although they are enriching uranium rather rapidly, which is causing people to scratch their heads. Eli Clifton, a senior advisor at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, said, and I quote, "The U.S. is considering using a nuclear weapon for the first time since Hiroshima and Nagasaki because our client state murdered our Iranian negotiating partner and started a war?" Jennifer Kavanaugh, who's the director of military analysis at the think tank Defense Priorities, said, quote, "The notion that the United States can conduct a few airstrikes and declare victory is an illusion. Any direct U.S. military strike on Iran is likely to mission creep into regime change or collapse or spiral into a long, protracted war. Israel's strikes on Iran may make U.S. diplomatic efforts more difficult, but there's still a chance at a deal and plenty of time to pursue one through negotiations. Amen." And let's hope that they get there. Meanwhile, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has said that Trump can continue to control the National Guard in Los Angeles. Now, my guess is that the city or state, whoever launched this, I believe it was the state, launched this lawsuit, will now ask for the entire Ninth Circuit to rule on this or take it directly to the Supreme Court. We'll see. But this is not a good thing. Essentially, the Ninth Circuit, these three judges from the Ninth Circuit kind of twisted themselves into knots to say, well, yeah, there's not an emergency, and yeah. I mean, the provision that they're basing this on was that local law enforcement was not capable of dealing with the situation in Los Angeles. And clearly they were. They had it under control. They continue to have it under control. They've said so. They keep holding press conferences, the sheriff and the chief of police, saying, well, yeah, everything's good here. But Trump is sending thousands more troops into Los Angeles, and he just mobilized more troops. He just mobilized troops to go into Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. So this is getting ugly. And like I said, this is part of the process that drives us to autocratic breakthrough.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll be picking up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us. It's Anything Goes Weekend here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Today we're reading from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This is a
an 1856 First English Translation edition of this author. And but you can still get it online, and a lot of different booksellers sell it. This is from chapter 11. What sort of despotism democratic nations have to fear? I had remarked during my stay in the United States that a democratic state of society, similar to that of the Americans, might offer singular facilities for the establishment of despotism. And I perceived, upon my return to Europe, how much use had already been made by most of our rulers of the notions, the sentiments, and the wants engendered by this same social condition for the purpose of extending the circle of their power. This led me to think that the nations of Christendom would perhaps eventually undergo some sort of oppression like that which hung over several of the nations of the world. But it would seem that if despotism were to be established among the democratic nations of our days, it might assume a different character, different from the Roman Empire, for example. It might be more extensive and more mild. It would degrade men without tormenting them. I do not question that in an age of instruction and equality like our own, sovereigns might more easily succeed in collecting all political power into their own hands and might interfere more habitually and decidedly within the circle of private interests than any sovereign of antiquity ever could do. But the same principle of equality which facilitates despotism tempers its rigor. When no member of the community has much power or much wealth, tyranny, as it were, without opportunities, tyranny is, as it were, without opportunities or a field of action. As all fortunes are scanty, the passions of men are naturally circumscribed, their imagination limited, their pleasures simple. This universal moderation moderates the sovereign himself and checks within certain limits the inordinate stretch of his own desires. Independently of these reasons, drawn from the nature of the state of society itself, I might add many others arising from causes beyond my subject, but I shall keep within the limits I have laid down to myself. Democratic governments may become violent and even cruel at certain periods of extreme effervescence or of great danger. Excuse me, think of George Bush and 9/11. But these crises will be rare and brief. When I consider the petty passions of our contemporaries, the mildness of their manners, the extent of their education, the purity of their religion, the gentleness of their morality, their regular and industrious habits, and the restraint with which they almost all observe in their vices, no less than in their virtues, I have no fear that they will meet with tyrants in their rulers, but rather guardians. I think then that the species of oppression by which democratic nations are menaced is unlike anything that ever existed before in our world. Our contemporaries will find no prototype of it in their memories. I am trying myself to choose an expression which will accurately convey the whole of the idea I have formed of it, but in vain. The old words, despotism and tyranny, are inappropriate. The thing itself is new, and since I cannot name it, I must attempt to define it. I seek to trace the novel features under which despotism may appear in the world. The first thing that strikes the observation is an immutable multiple, equal and alike, incessantly endeavoring to procure the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. Think now of a television society. Each of them, living apart, is as a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is close to them, but he sees them not. He touches them, but he feels them not. He exists, but in himself and for himself alone. And if his kindred still remain to him, he may be said at any rate to have lost his country. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure their gratifications and to watch over their fate. Facebook? That power is absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood, but it seeks, on the contrary, to keep them in perpetual childhood. It is well content that people should rejoice, providing that they think of nothing but rejoicing. For their happiness, such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and only arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their industry, regulates the descent of property, and subdivides their inheritances. What remains but to spare them all the care of thinking and all the trouble of living? It every day renders the exercise of the free agency of man less useful and less frequent. It circumscribes the will within a narrower range and gradually robs a man of all the uses of himself. The principle of equality has prepared men for these things. It has predisposed men to endure them and oftentimes to look on them as benefits. I have always thought that the servitude of the regular, quiet, and gentle kind, which I have just described, might be combined more easily than is commonly believed with some of the outward forms of freedom, and that it might even establish itself under the wing of the sovereign of the people. Our contemporaries are constantly excited by two conflicting passions. They want to be led, and they wish to remain free. As they cannot destroy either one or the other of these contrary propensities, they strive to satisfy them both at once. They devise a sole, tutelary, and all-powerful form of government, but elected by the people. They combine the principle of centralization and that of popular sovereignty. This gives them a respite. They console themselves for being tutelaged by the reflection that they have chosen their own guardians. And it continues. It's a brilliant book, Democracy in America by de Tocqueville.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Midnight streets, sirens wail, peaceful marchers, faces pale, unmarked vans, no warning sign, rights erased in real time. No badge, no name, just camouflage, justice lost in the mirage. Trump is normalizing the unthinkable, turning freedom into something sinkable. Democracy's edge, now a slippery slope, grasping for truth, losing hope.
35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Sam Stein is predicting if Trump deploys troops to New York City, all hell is going to break loose. Of course, that's exactly what Donald Trump wants. Meanwhile, yesterday was Juneteenth. You know, we opened the show with a little concise history of it. Trump never mentioned it. The White House always, issues a statement on federal holidays. Happy Memorial Day, Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, whatever it may be. They issued no statement whatsoever yesterday. And Trump went on his Nazi-infested social media site and said, too many non-working holidays in America. It's costing our country billions of dollars to keep all these businesses closed. Workers don't want it either. Soon we'll end up having a holiday for every working day of the year. It must change if we're going to make America great again. In other words, get rid of that holiday that black people celebrate. I keep telling you, and I think we all know by now, especially, you even have federal judges now saying this whole anti-DEI thing, it's got nothing to do with diversity, equity, or inclusion. It has to do with blocking out the existence, the history, and the rights of black people, Hispanic people, queer people, Asian people, and ultimately even women. Anybody who's not a straight white man, because that's their constituency. All right, what's on your mind today? Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's up?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we'd like to have your weather here for the next 4 days.
Oh, is it going to?
It's going to be 97 plus with 110 heat index.
Holy cow.
Yeah, all of a sudden we were with you, and we couldn't hit the 70s for 3 weeks. Now it's got 97 for the next 4 days.
Yeah.
But why I called, maybe I'm wrong. Everybody's talking about next year's elections. How about this year? Should we ramp up this year with Virginia and New Jersey? Because let's be honest, Youngkin's running there, and you got a big trumper in New Jersey.
Yeah.
If Youngkin wins or goes like, say, 52-48, Republicans got a good stand because what's her name? Susan Collins, Ron Johnson, Tillis. You notice they're squawking. Mm-hmm. If they're close elections, Tom, it gives her, Susan Collins, a reason to go, oh, I didn't know that was in the bill, like she did when she hired all these judges. Because we got to blow them out. Nobody's talking about November except Carl Fisk. that comes on stuff.
Well,
they're already talking that this girl's going to win.
Yeah, the conversation about November is probably best held in August, September, but and October. But Russ, every indication, I mean, every special election that we've had since Trump took office 5 months ago. Wow, how time flies. Every special election that's been held has shown, a blue shift that was just, far greater than anybody was anticipating. I think these are going to be blowout elections for Democrats this fall.
Well, Tom, let's be honest. Youngkin won because, the Afro-Americans didn't show because they didn't like McCall. He only won by like 33,000 votes.
Right.
And the girl in New Jersey, I don't know, is she the one that was in there? She's running against a big Trump guy.
Yep.
I mean, and let's be also, what was the poll out yesterday?
Yeah, that's Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. Yeah.
45% of the people think we're no better off than when we had Biden. 34% say we're worse. 21% saying, yeah, we're doing better under Trump. I don't know how we're underwater with the border either.
Yeah. I don't think we are.
61-39.
No, I get it. I think the tide is turning. I really do, Russ. And I think people are rapidly approaching a point of enough.
Are you going to start talking about the November elections in September a little and have them on if you can?
Oh, yeah. I mean, once the primaries have happened, I mean, we don't have, typically, we don't have candidates on prior to primaries. Now, I broke that rule yesterday with Jocelyn Benson. But typically, we don't have candidates on prior to primaries. But after primaries,
They already had them, I thought.
Well,
New Jersey and Virginia.
Oh, okay. Well, they may well have. I haven't been paying attention. So,
of course, Carl Fisk comes on. You know him?
I don't.
Carl Fisk? Well, he comes on Stutz every Thursday. He's a school board member.
Uh-huh.
And they're already talking about the girl they're already talking that she's going to win big in Virginia.
You're talking Mikey Sherrill. Oh, no, that's New Jersey.
Which one's running in New Jersey?
Yeah, that's Mikey Sherrill, I think.
Well, no, there's supposedly another girl running in Virginia, according to what he said.
Huh.
I don't know. But
I'll have to look it up, Russ. I'm sorry. I have not been following those elections, but
I haven't either. I just go by what he says on Thursday about Virginia.
Yeah, well,
he's a big time.
Yeah, I get it. And he's welcome to talk about it, and so is stuff. I just don't. It's not on my radar screen yet. Russ, thanks for the call. Steve in Park Ridge, Illinois. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Talk about a small world. I just played golf in Hickory Hills 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
Your previous caller.
Yeah. Sweet.
In any event, I was a marshal at the 2017-2018 women's marches in downtown Chicago. Mm-hmm. And the estimated crowds were 250,000, I think, in 17, 300,000 in 18. And then I was at No Kings this past Saturday at Daly Plaza, which is downtown Chicago. And there's so much more energy and vigor and needed, as much.
There's so much more outrage.
It really is. It's really amazing to think that we had those turnouts at the very beginning when he just had his little training wheels as a president, and now it's a full-blown, almost autocracy, breakthrough, et cetera, et cetera. What I want to basically emphasize is the importance of people getting into the streets. Now, I'm 75 years old, and after Kent State, I quit going to college for a semester, and I was in the streets nearly every day. And I really think that the public protest is what really moved the government to finally end that.
I agree. That
horrible war.
We backed down Jerry Ford. I agree.
Yes, and we need, the one card that we can play between now and election is more and more folks following the lead of Saturday No Kings and building those numbers. And you probably talked about the 3.5% of the population getting into the streets, which has toppled other
Erica Chenoweth's math on that. Yes, I'm quite familiar with it.
Yes. So this is just a plug to keep it up. And the final thing I'll say is we were like crammed like sardines compared to 2017, 2018. I was really impressed with the vigor, the energy, and the signage, because there's just so much more now to protest.
Yeah.
Oh, and one final point. I don't know if you know who Alex Lace is. He's a MAGA first-class fatherhood podcaster.
I've never heard of him.
This just came across Facebook and a couple different reputable sites. And his quote was, "Make no mistake, what happened to Melissa Hartmann was a message to all Democrats. You vote against us, and your life is at stake."
Oh, I saw that.
And
I did see that. It was reposted.
So you are aware of that.
Blue Sky.
I mean, that is like, with Mike Lee and this guy, we need to keep what you're doing and hope it grows.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of your show of you and WCPT. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. Frank in Miami. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind today? Frank, watching Free Speech TV in Miami, Florida? You got to be listening to your phone, not your TV, Frank, unless your phone is muted. So anyhow, I'm going to hit a break here, and we'll be right back on the other side of this break with more of your calls. It's 44 and a half minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Stick around. I'll be right back with your calls.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Anything Goes Weekend. Picking up your calls. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Patrick in Chicago. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
How's it going, Tom? I wanted to make the point. I think the Democrats are going about challenging Trump and his taking over the National Guard the wrong way. I think they need to make it a Second Amendment issue, because right now California doesn't have a National Guard, as far as I understand. Like, I don't think he activated all the troops, but if he's activating, like, he's starting to activate some of them, eventually he's going to get them all, and California will be defenseless with no militia. And so I think that's the argument they need to make in court. What do you think?
Well, the Second Amendment does mention militias.
Yeah, that's what I based it on.
But it also, I don't know how you do that, Patrick.
Yeah, it's difficult, because the way I was thinking was, okay, so the people of California, according to the Second Amendment, have a right to be armed. And if Trump takes the National Guard away from them and turns the National Guard on them, well, they become the Army at that point. But then, the California has no National Guards; they're defenseless. Yeah, in my opinion, would be the violation. Yeah,
I get that. The National Guard is their well-regulated militia. Let me ponder that, Patrick. I don't see an immediate application or an argument that could be made in court, but you never know. So let me think about it.
The way they butchered it last time.
Yeah, there you go, Patrick. Thanks for the call, Monique, in Seattle. Hey, Monique, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to your caller a few callers ago. She was talking about the turnout at some of the protests and older people. She was refuting the idea that older people hadn't turned out, and that's fair. But her comment that it was mostly white, I mean, I'm a black woman, and, black people have fought for justice harder than anyone else in this country, and we got our heads bashed in under Obama, right?
Yep.
And now we have a president who is explicitly threatening us, threatening brown people, pulling them off the street. We didn't vote for him. It's the majority of white people who voted in this country who voted for Trump, right? So I think that it's absolutely right that it is mostly white people who are out there on the front lines protesting.
In other words, we screwed
right?
up. We screwed it up. We get to fix it.
Well, yeah, mostly.
Makes sense to me.
I mean, now my focus is really on protecting people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to take care of people in my own community. I'm trying to use the little bit of privilege I have to protect immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
But, the idea that somehow we're missing, we've done the work. We've done it for decades and decades. And if she felt, as she owned, that she mostly saw white people, that's exactly where we need to be.
Well, I suspect also
y'all did this, and y'all need to fix this.
Yeah, I suspect that the demographics of communities are reflected in who turns out, too. I mean, communities that have large black populations probably had a lot of black people in the streets.
Yeah, there are black people in the streets. It's not that we're not there, and it's not that even brown people aren't risking, their safety to be there.
Yep.
But I absolutely think if it's the majority of white people out there, that's exactly where we need to be.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we need to be.
Yeah.
And to the extent that some white people are willing to put themselves between the police and us, great.
Yeah, it's
but
called
we don't
use your
see
privilege.
That. We don't
use your privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear your music. Thank you, Tom, for taking my call.
Thanks, Monique. Great to hear from you. Appreciate the call. It's 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out.
There was a time we lit the dark with truth engraved in fire and bark, a dream declared in freedom's name, a torch we passed, a sacred flame. But greed crept in on velvet paws, rewriting rights with rigged new laws. From gilded towers and whispered deals, they sold the heart, they broke the seal. When justice bends and truth comes undone, the stars are dimmed, the stripes are frayed. In silence now our values fade. This is how the truth gets lost, when freedom comes with such a cost. We watched it drift like ash and dust.
Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hey, Trump spent his entire life avoiding paying taxes, which means that he has not paid for our military that he's so proud of. We paid for the vast majority of, everybody below the 90%, 95%. All of us paid for our military. Trump hasn't paid for it. In fact, he's gotten more money from the government than he has ever paid in taxes. And yet he's taking our military and using it against the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that should be pointed out as often as possible, that clown that felon did not pay for our military.
Yeah. And this is true of many of our billionaires, particularly those who are the real estate billionaires.
Regarding Mike, who called earlier, basically what, by the way, Netanyahu is the new curveball and Shalaby. Those were the clowns that duped George W. Bush into fighting their war in Iraq.
Although I would argue they didn't dupe him. I think, Bush went looking for somebody to tell him what he wanted to hear.
Idiot.
Yeah.
He was a willing idiot. Yes, that's correct. And so we have this situation where right now the Dow, the markets have flatlined with Donald Trump's bungling the tariffs. That's the same thing that happened in 2018 when he started putting his tariffs in and cutting taxes. The markets flatlined that year also until the Fed started pumping in trillions of dollars into the markets in the form of quantitative easing.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump has been a total failure in the 5 months that he's been president. He still hasn't surpassed Biden in the number of points added to the markets, and the dollar has lost roughly 10%.
10%. Yeah, it's incredible. He's impoverished America on the world stage.
Yeah, so every American, when they go out and buy something, they're getting roughly 10% less than what they got from the day that.
And you'll discover it immediately if you travel outside the United States.
And the same thing happened. The same thing happened when he was president the first time around. The gold grew way faster than the markets did, and it's doing it again now. And no one's talking about that because it'll make Trump. It'll make that clown. It'll make that felon, that convicted felon. It'll make him look bad. So the media won't talk about that.
No, I totally get it, Larry. Totally get it. Larry, thank you. Always great to hear from you, and I always appreciate your perspective. Chuck in Mount Prospect, Illinois. Hey, Chuck, what's on your mind today?
Hey, the Chicago area is being well represented today.
I've got a lot of calls from Illinois today.
Go Cubs. I'm a retired high school teacher, and I wish I could address ICE agents with just two things. One's been said before, but another hasn't. If what you're doing is right, why are you covering your faces?
Yep.
And
your
the
badges.
other thing is, I would say I'd be real careful. Fortunes change. A lot of Nazis thought they were invincible, and fortunes change. And even when they were old men, they were eventually caught down for crimes they committed.
Yep.
Because I think they feel invincible right now, but this could change very quickly for them, and I would tell them to be very careful.
Yeah, I would share that. I share that sentiment, Chuck. And I don't think this is going to last. I don't think it can last.
I don't either.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for the call. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Thanks, Tom. The George Floyd reaction from Trump, just shoot him, could be looked at violence, but it also could be viewed as another racist just lashing out and a clown throwing ketchup. Because the overall effect of his response, and when you look at, there were at least 3 or 4 guttural negative responses Trump came up with when Bibi and Putin had murdered a bunch of people in bombings, and he was repulsed by it.
Yeah.
And he's repulsed by the killings, and as far as the Iran war and going to war and dropping the bomb, he will allow Bibi to do all the killing because he's Mr. Bonespurs, and he knows he's been a failure, the clown failure his whole life. And there's no way he's going to, there's 2 reasons why he won't drop the bomb. 1, he's not a killer, and 2, he's been a failure, Mr. Bonespurs, his whole life, and he can't pull the trigger. He'll let Bibi do all the work, and he'll direct it. In 2 weeks, he'll come up with a decision. But until then, he'll profit off of everything, and he'll bring us down as far as we can until we remove him.
I think he is hoping that he's not going to have to make a decision. He apparently Steve Bannon went to the White House last night and had dinner with Trump, and the press is showing some pictures of it. And Bannon, of course, is very opposed to our getting involved with Iran, directly involved in the war. And and Trump has a long history of when he doesn't want to make a decision, simply saying, I'll decide in 2 weeks. It's sort of the equivalent of let me think about that, as just a way of not deciding in the moment, rather than being deliberative. And I think he's hoping that within 2 weeks, that either Netanyahu will have done something, that finishes it off, or there'll be an Iranian revolution, or God only knows what. But
or we all move on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you, Dave. But also we're not talking about the big beautiful betrayal bill, so which kind of works to his benefit. Dave, thanks for the call.
And that's the whole point of all of it. So we're not talking about the bill.
I'm not sure that's the whole point. I disagree with Mark Pocan on that. I think that's a side benefit, but Trump will take it. Dave, thanks for the call. We'll be right back on the other side of this break. We'll continue our program. Look out, retirees are being forced into privatized Medicare.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Today we're reading from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This is an 1856 First English Translation edition. But you can still get it online. A lot of different booksellers sell it. This is from Chapter 11. What sort of despotism democratic nations have to fear? I had remarked during my stay in the United States that a democratic state of society, similar to that of the Americans, might offer singular facilities for the establishment of despotism. And I perceived, upon my return to Europe, how much use had already been made by most of our rulers of the notions, the sentiments, and the wants engendered by this same social condition for the purpose of extending the circle of their power. This led me to think that the nations of Christendom would perhaps eventually undergo some sort of oppression like that which hung over several of the nations of the ancient world. But it would seem that if despotism were to be established among the democratic nations of our days, it might assume a different character, different from the Roman Empire, for example. It might be more extensive and more mild. It would degrade men without tormenting them. I do not question that in an age of instruction and equality like our own, sovereigns might more easily succeed in collecting all political power into their own hands and might interfere more habitually and decidedly within the circle of private interests than any sovereign of antiquity ever could do. But the same principle of equality which facilitates despotism tempers its. When no member of the community has much power or much wealth, tyranny, as it were, without opportunities, tyranny is, as it were, without opportunities or a field of action. As all fortunes are scanty, the passions of men are naturally circumscribed, their imagination limited, their pleasures simple. This universal moderation moderates the sovereign himself and checks within certain limits the inordinate stretch of his own desires. Independently of these reasons, drawn from the nature of the state of society itself, I might add many others arising from causes beyond my subject, but I shall keep within the limits I have laid down to myself. Democratic governments may become violent and even cruel at certain periods of extreme effervescence or of great danger. Excuse me, think of George Bush and 9/11. But these crises will be rare and brief. When I consider the petty passions of our contemporaries, the mildness of their manners, the extent of their education, the purity of their religion, the gentleness of their morality, their regular and industrious habits, and the restraint with which they almost all observe in their vices, no less than in their virtues, I have no fear that they will meet with tyrants in their rulers, but rather guardians. I think then that the species of oppression by which democratic nations are menaced is unlike anything that ever existed before in our world. Our contemporaries will find no prototype of it in their memories. I am trying myself to choose an expression which will accurately convey the whole of the idea I have formed of it, but in vain. The old words, despotism and tyranny, are inappropriate. The thing itself is new, and since I cannot name it, I must attempt to define it. I seek to trace the novel features under which despotism may appear in the world. The first thing that strikes the observation is an immutable multitude of men, all equal and alike, incessantly endeavoring to procure the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. Think now of a television society. Each of them, living apart, is as a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is close to them, but he sees them not. He touches them, but he feels them not. He exists, but in himself and for himself alone. And if his kindred still remain to him, he may be said at any rate to have lost his country. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure their gratifications and to watch over their fate. Facebook? That power is absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood, but it seeks, on the contrary, to keep them in perpetual childhood. It is well content that people should rejoice, providing that they think of nothing but rejoicing. For their happiness, such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and only arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies their necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their industry, regulates the descent of property, and subdivides their inheritances. What remains but to spare them all the care of thinking and all the trouble of living? Thus, it every day renders the exercise of the free agency of man less useful and less frequent. It circumscribes the will within a narrower range and gradually robs a man of all the uses of himself. The principle of equality has prepared men for these things. It has predisposed men to endure them and oftentimes to look on them as benefits. I have always thought that the servitude of the regular, quiet, and gentle kind, which I have just described, might be combined more easily than is commonly believed with some of the outward forms of freedom, and that it might even establish itself under the wing of the sovereign of the people. Our contemporaries are constantly excited by two conflicting passions. They want to be led, and they wish to remain free. As they cannot destroy either one or the other of these contrary propensities, they strive to satisfy them both at once. They devise a sole, tutelary, and all-powerful form of government, but elected by the people. They combine the principle of centralization and that of popular sovereignty. This gives them a respite. They console themselves for being in tutelage by the reflection that they have chosen their own guardians. And it continues. It's a brilliant book. A Democracy in America by de Tocqueville.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. This is just wild stuff. This New York court ruling, the highest court in New York. Now it's kind of weird because their highest court is not called the Supreme Court. That's one of the lower courts. So don't try to make sense out of it. But anyhow, their highest court just ruled day before yesterday, actually, against the city's retirees. Eric Adams, the Trump-loving mayor of New York City, he started loving Trump when Trump pardoned him or stopped prosecuting him or whatever for his corruption. Adams is on his way out, but he had basically changed. This was to cut $600 million out of the city's budget. And what happened was the Medicare Advantage companies came in, or at least one of them, and said, let us insure New York's retirees who are guaranteed health care for the rest of their lives, right? Let us provide that health care through Medicare Advantage. And of course, the government will reimburse us in excess of our expenses and make a big profit on it. So we'll give it to you cheap, cheap, cheap. And whereas with real Medicare, you have to have, the city would have to be paying for a Medigap policy to go along with it. Now, number one, this tells us that we need to reform Medicare, right? We should do away with that 20% hole. It's just pretty simple stuff, and reduce the monthly expense for it, or heavily, make it heavily progressive. But number two, it also shows that Mayor Adams. This is, I don't have any evidence to support this, but I'm guessing that there was some spiffing of the mayor with regard to this, given who he is and how he conducts himself. But I don't know. I can't make that assertion. I can only say it would be interesting to find out. But there are 250,000 retirees in New York City, and they are now all, the court said, that's it. The mayor has the power to do this. Tough luck, retirees. The New York City Finance Committee Chair, Justin Brannan, who is also a candidate for the city's controller, He said the city of New York should never, ever be screwing over retirees, and neither should the courts. Nobody will ever want to work for New York City again. Zero trust. Medicare Advantage is a bait-and-switch scam and a betrayal. Enough. City Hall doesn't care about retirees. And I suspect that's probably a, a widespread sentiment. Meanwhile, as Donald Trump is telling Josh Hawley this week that he doesn't think that there are any cuts for Medicaid in the legislation that he has called his one big beautiful betrayal or bill, the Senate Finance Committee, this from Paige Cunningham over on Yahoo News. Oh, it's from the Washington Post, excuse me. The Senate Finance Committee's revisions to a bill released Monday could prompt even steeper coverage losses, sharply reining in a Medicaid financing maneuver that hospital groups say would slash payments to their facilities. Chip Kahn, who is the CEO of the American Federation of Hospitals, or actually the Federation of American Hospitals, just issued a statement. He said, the Senate just made the bad bill worse. Rural communities will be the hardest hit, with struggling hospitals compelled to face difficult decisions about what services to cut. He notes that rural areas disproportionately rely on Medicaid, and they're often the first backstop for patients without health coverage. And he notes hospital networks say they might reduce pediatric, maternity, or behavioral health services, end telehealth programs, close rural facilities, and enact layoffs if these Medicaid cuts become law. In fact, in a recent survey by the American Medical Group Association, those arguments or assertions were all confirmed. The hospitals stand to lose $321 billion over the next 10 years under this House version, and an additional $63 billion under the Senate version, on top of the House version. Hospitals, by the way, collected $262 billion last year for Medicare, or Medicaid, excuse me. And that was, I'm sorry, that was in 2022. The Senate is trying to pass this bill by July 4th. That's the date that Donald Trump put on it. Now, keep in mind, we are already operating outside, without a budget, basically. We're already, we're already in that, any day now the government is going to have to stop functioning because there's no money left. We're well into the beginning stages of that. I mean, that's just probably a matter of a month or two down the road. And 42% of Americans oppose changing tax, spending, or Medicaid policies. And of course, this bill changes all of them. So Mehmet Oz, the reality TV star, who's now the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, had a lunch meeting on Tuesday with some Republican senators, excuse me, and Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia came out and said, oh, he just reassured us that there's not going to be any cuts. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. It's incredible how gullible these people are. And finally, our geeky science for the day. This is pretty amazing. Children now born, or born now, rather, kids who are being born as we speak, may live in a world where the U.S. can only produce half as much of its key food crops. This is a new analysis that was, they looked at, this is done by the Stanford Dorr School of Sustainability, Stanford University. It was 8 years in the making. This is a study that ran for 8 years. They looked at more than 12,000 regions around the world across 54 countries at maize, or corn, soybeans, rice, wheat, cassava, and sorghum. Those 6 crops constitute 2/3 of all the calories human beings consume. And the findings are stark, according to Laura Pattinson on CNN. She writes, every 1 degree Celsius the world warms above pre-industrial levels will drag down, and we're already, by the way, 1.5 degrees, will drag down global food production by an average of 120 calories per person per day. This study, by the way, was published day before yesterday in Nature magazine. It's solid, it's peer-reviewed. She noted, if the climate warms by 3 degrees, that's basically like everyone on the planet giving up breakfast. They add, if humans keep burning large amounts of fossil fuels, maize or corn production could fall by 40% in the grain belt of the U.S., as well as in China, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Wheat production could fall by 40% in the U.S. and those regions. Soybean yields by 50% in the U.S. One of the striking findings of the study, she notes, is that some of the wealthiest countries are likely to be the hardest hit. And the reason why is we have not developed resilient agriculture systems that actually exist in poorer countries. And here's the bottom line. Global warming will be particularly devastating for the United States, where it's projected to reduce yields by 40 to 50% for all of these staple crops except rice. Rice, of course, loves warm weather. So, it's kind of the exception to the rule. But this is what we're looking at. Global warming, because we've allowed fossil fuel companies to lie to us for 60 years, and because multiple Republican administrations have promoted the lies of the fossil fuel industry, and the Trump administration continues to embrace the lies of the fossil fuel industry, we may be looking at it just 20, 30, 40 years down the road, starvation here in the United States.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Will they call it the Trump famine or the ExxonMobil famine? I don't know. It's 15 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Pretending those weekends. And welcome back. Joe in Seattle. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. Hey, this is on the autocrat breakthrough. There's some of us people that marched, and we're feeling that we've gone beyond that point of marching in the streets with political signs and singing folk songs. For the last 30 years, we feel that we've been dealing with psychopaths. Netanyahu, all the way down to the Bush administration. In your opinion, where do you feel that we're going from this point?
It looks to me like there's still some decisions to be made, both within the administration and within our court system. And I think it's still possible to constrain Trump. But it's going to get more and more difficult as time goes on. Frankly, my biggest concern is that ICE is behaving like an out-of-control law enforcement agency. Right. Live in a small town and the cops start running speed traps, and pretty soon they have everybody terrorized. It's kind of the theme of a lot of movies and TV shows. That's what's going on. It looks like to me, and I don't know to what extent Customs and Border Patrol is in on it or part of it, but it seems like they're also, and the two agencies are kind of cousins or brother and sister, and so if he's not restrained or constrained over the next few months, I fear that we will go, we will be reaching a point of no return. I'm not sure that I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but we're a hell of a lot closer to it than we were in January.
Right. We have a friend of ours that works in the Pentagon, and this Iran ordeal is straight out of the movie Dr. Strangelove, in his opinion. If someone was a fly on the wall and heard what these people have planned, it's totally insanity.
Yeah. It's been a lot of years since I watched that movie. Remember Slim Pickens riding the bomb?
One of the points that was brought up in one of those meetings, a couple generals got up and left, I guess, was the broken windows scenario, which I'm not familiar with that analogy, but it sounds to me like we'll break the window and then pretend like we're putting it back together.
Now, the broken windows thing, this was Rudy Giuliani's thing in New York City back during his administration when he was mayor. And that was the theory that if you allow a neighborhood to look like hell, then people will start treating it like hell. So if you don't fix the broken windows, you're going to end up with a lot more broken windows. If you don't clean the graffiti, you're going to end up with a lot more graffiti. And those things are early warning indicators that more crime is coming. Whereas if you clean the neighborhood up and you keep things nice and spiffy and tight, then crime rates drop. And there have been studies on this, and I've seen studies rebutting it, and I've seen studies supportive of it. And I'm not sure what the consensus is these days, but that's where that came from, Joe. I'm not sure how that would apply other than saying, you know, hey, if we let Iran get away with small stuff, they will then try to get away with large stuff, which is essentially the essence of the broken windows theory. Joe, thanks for the call. It's 19 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you in just a moment. Stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So every time we have an election, I mean, most recently we saw this in 2022, Putin and Mohammed bin Salman, Russia and Saudi Arabia, start raising the price of oil, basically to stick it to the Democrats, hoping that they can lose power. I mean, it worked in 2022. They got their majority in the House of Representatives, and you'll recall all those $6 gasoline and $5 gasoline, and everybody squealing about it, and the little stickers they were putting on pumps with pictures of Joe Biden saying, I did this. Well, they're preparing to do it again. They've cut production, Saudi Arabia and Russia, and it's going to get a whole lot worse over the course of the next year as we're heading toward 2024. So what can we do about this? Well, I have a very specific proposal, and by the way, 70 different environmental groups have joined in this, along with Senator Ed Markey and several members of Congress, and that is to ban the export of American-produced crude oil. Make America energy independent, and we control the price. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Repeat it loud, repeat it long. That's how you turn the truth to wrong. He came down the golden stairs with a grin, sold the nation snake oil wrapped in sin, said the votes were fake, the news was too. Now the lies, the law, and the false feels true. Screens glow red in every home, echoes bouncing from the microphone, facts erased in a sea of noise, truth drowned out by a stolen voice. Welcome to America's ministry of propaganda, where the louder you lie, the more they'll stand ya. Repeat it till the crowd forgets the truth was ever even said. This is how empires rot, from the inside, from the top.
Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Joe in Puerto Rico. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks so much for taking the call. I love your program.
Thank you.
Hey, the dilemma that I think the Democrats face, and wholeheartedly, hopefully you'll agree with this, and that is, you know, we complain and bitch and moan about all these things that the Republicans are doing, rightly so, right? But we have to be a solutions-based party, and we've got to come forward and realize maybe our flaws as well. And I think the flaw is this, and that is, you know, we've been fighting about building the wall and bitching and moaning about so much. And what has transpired is now we're the bad guys because we won't build the wall. Now, I'm not at all against immigration, one iota. I believe immigration is absolute paramount.
Biden actually built some of the wall and repaired a whole lot of the rest of it.
Exactly. And I believe that we should promote and say we need to finish building the wall, but at the same time and in the same breath, we have to create and bring forward the immigration bill that was pushed away by Trump so he could get elected. Mm-hmm. Bring things forward.
You're talking about Jim Langford's bill?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
that was a very strong immigration bill that had bipartisan support. You're absolutely right.
Correct. And so instead of complaining and wringing their hands constantly. Right. They've got to get off their butts, and they've got to bring forward these ideas because people just they close down. They're not listening, and people are just throwing their hands up, and it's really frightening, as we all know. We're poised to go down the drain here pretty quickly, and we're not fighting. And we should be fighting in that regard as well as fighting on other levels. As we know, Trump throws shiny balls everywhere, every day, and no one has the concept or the ability to focus on the reality of what's actually happening.
Yeah, I totally get it. The thing that really outrages me is that what they're doing is they're saying to people who are in this country legally but are not yet citizens, people who have asylum claims or people who have other reasons. For example, today or the day before, there was an Afghan refugee, a guy who had been a translator for U.S. troops in Afghanistan.
I read that.
Put his life at risk for our troops. Our promise to him was, we will let you into the United States if you will serve us. He served us. We brought him into the United States. He shows up at court for his monthly check-in on the path toward becoming an American citizen, and ICE shows up and arrests him and hauls him off, and he's in a prison right now. And they're going to deport him back to Afghanistan, where he will be murdered. And this is just obscene. I mean, and they're just doing this to meet the damn quotas so that Stephen Miller could feel good that he threw enough brown and black people out of the country.
Correct. And they're breaking the law left and right, and we're allowing it. We're not having mass demonstrations. I mean, I'm all for the demonstrations. I was part of it. I'm back in Colorado right now, and it's impressive that we have so many people in all different regions of the country. But we have got to stand up and be willing to drop our work and go and demonstrate to the point of somebody's got to listen.
I agree. So, Joe, should I change your location from Puerto Rico to Colorado, or are you typically in Puerto Rico?
I'm back and forth. I'm blessed in that regard.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Tom.
All right. Good talking to you, Joe.
You do.
Yep. Thank you. Alan in DeKalb, Illinois. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was going to say, as alarmist as it might sound, I do have a few reasons to believe that Trump is considering dropping a nuclear bomb on Iran.
Right.
So, first, if we think back, he was consistently looking for a reason to launch a nuke in his first term, whether it was against a hurricane, another country, whatever it was, but was always talked out of it. Yeah. We know everybody in his administration is pretty much crazy now. Another reason is that he believes that Iran issued assassination orders against him, which now makes this personal.
Right. Yeah,
and then another one
lied about that.
Yeah. And another one is that he demanded the unconditional surrender of a nation, and
without even specifying to whom they should surrender.
Exactly. But so he demands unconditional surrender, then repeatedly calls for the evacuation of a major metropolitan city. And what does that remind you of?
I don't know. Tell me.
Truman.
Truman.
II.
Yeah,
Just before he dropped the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima.
And I think that's how the people in Tehran took it, by the way. He created some small amount of panic there. Alan, thank you. I agree with you. Thank you very much. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Anything Goes Weekend, picking up your calls. I'll be right back with you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Vince Houghton's Nuking the Moon and Other Intelligence Schemes and Military Plots Left on the Drawing Board. This is Chapter 7, Operation Northwoods. On April 17, 1961, more than 1,400 Cuban exiles forming the Brigada de Asalto 2506 landed on the beaches of Cuba at Playa Girón in the Bahia de Cojinos, the Bay of Pigs. Their mission was to overthrow the regime of Fidel Castro, Cuba's increasingly communist leader, who had himself overthrown the regime of American ally Batista just 2 years before. A communist leader just 90 miles from Key West was a rather painful thorn in the side of the newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy, and his ouster was considered a high national security priority, as it had been for Kennedy's predecessor, Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion was backed by the U.S. government and the CIA. We can argue why the Bay of Pigs invasion failed until we're blue in the face, and many people still do. For many in the Cuban exile community, the mission failed because JFK refused to give American naval and air support, elements called in for the original plan developed by the Eisenhower administration. Maybe this is true. The problem here is that we begin to descend into the realm of the counterfactuals, the if-onlys and what-ifs, things that we are doing our damnedest to avoid. Look, I've met a lot of the Cubans who took part in that invasion, many of whom are permanently settled in or around Miami, my hometown. They are impressive men, and I wouldn't put anything past them. If they say they could have kicked out Castro with U.S. naval and air support, who am I to argue? But I still will, because things are much more complicated from an intelligence perspective. Despite the lack of air and naval support, and despite the intensity and desire of the Cuban exile forces, it would have been immeasurably difficult to overcome one of the most problematic aspects of the entire invasion. Castro not only knew they were coming, he knew when and where they were coming. A combination of piss-poor information security, or in today's parlance, InfoSec, with the ability of Cuban intelligence to infiltrate the Miami exile community meant that the secret mission to free Cuba of Castro was anything but secret. It's not like this was a huge surprise for the CIA or the U.S. military. The Cuban intelligence service was very good, and some in the exile community had loose lips. In this environment, it was nearly impossible to conduct effective counterintelligence and keep the invasion secret. Most telling of all, the Soviets had literally broadcast their knowledge of the mission before it happened. On April 13th, Radio Moscow released an English-language newscast in which they predicted an invasion of Cuba by CIA-trained exiles within the week. It seems they were trying to warn us against carrying out the invasion, a type of deterrence through propaganda. Hey, we know you're coming, so perhaps now is not a good time for your secret operation. Clearly, that didn't work. The blowback from the failed mission was significant on multiple levels. More than 100 members of the 2506 Brigade were killed in combat, along with 4 American volunteer pilots from the Alabama Air National Guard, who were contracted by the CIA. Hundreds more in Cuba would be executed in the days and weeks following the invasion, as Castro eliminated anyone suspected of abetting the exiles. More than 1,200 of the brigade would be captured by the Cuban government, and some of those members were executed. The Kennedy administration was embarrassed by the failed mission. U.S. government looked inept and failing to maintain order even in its own backyard. In the zero-sum where victory for one of the superpowers was defeat for the other, this was a huge win for the Soviets. Not to mention that the invasion pushed Castro even more firmly into the Soviets. And as far as the strength of the regime was concerned, the Bay of Pigs invasion did the exact opposite of what was intended. It made Castro's regime more powerful than ever before. The operation was a great political victory for the Cubans at home and abroad. Castro was a hero in the eyes of his people for defeating the Yankee invasion and was able to consolidate his power. The fiasco also elevated the Cuban government to a newfound global status, transforming communist Cuba from a grieved little country to an equal in the eyes of the world. In fact, Argentinian physician turned revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara actually thanked the United States for the failed invasion. The CIA bore the brunt of the blame for the failed mission. President Kennedy fired CIA Director Allen Dulles, along with Deputy Director Charles Cabell and Deputy Director for Plans Richard M. Bissell, the 3 men who made up the core of the agency's leadership, particularly in the realm of covert action. Kennedy also removed, at least temporarily, major paramilitary operations from the purview of the CIA. For more than a decade, CIA had been the agency with primary responsibility for covert operations, but now it was benched. Into the void leapt the U.S. military. In June 1961, about 2 months after the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy approved National Security Action Memoranda 55, 56, and 57, which codified the shift in paramilitary responsibility from the CIA to the Pentagon. Nothing else really changed. The U.S. government was still looking for ways to oust Castro from power, just through a different government agency. By autumn, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a legendary intelligence officer, or infamous, or both, depending on your perspective, was asked to brainstorm ideas to get rid of Fidel. He didn't disappoint. In February 19...
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. America is suffering from an epidemic of bullying. And one of the things we know is that culture, including bullying, flows from the top down. We've seen studies where when issues of for example, being gay or transgender are being debated in the public, gay and transgender kids in school are more likely to be bullied. When racial issues are being discussed, people of minority races are more likely to be bullied. Well, now we've got a man who has literally built his career on being a bully, Donald Trump, as president, or was president, as candidate. And he is driving this insane bullying campaign and using it as a political weapon across the United States. And it's contagious. It's dangerous. There's an entire article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled America's New Epidemic, A Nation Overrun by Bullies. Check it out. 5 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Vanola in Washington, D.C. Hey, Vanola, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Happy Friday. Thank you for taking the call. I used to study journalism, and it just bothers me how the media reports on Trump. For instance, what he's doing is not deporting. What he's doing is kidnapping and disappearing. Mm-hmm. And I think the media ought to say that.
I agree.
But I'm concerned about California, actually, and I'm just wondering what he's doing. I don't know U.S. history well enough to know if there's precedent for this. But could it be that he actually is invading California to overthrow the Californian government?
Yes.
I mean, it is like the fourth largest economy in the world.
Yep. Hey, I think he would love to own or control California. I believe that what he's trying to do is provoke violent confrontations so he can use those as a pretext to declare an insurrection. And once he's declared an insurrection, he can make himself dictator for life. I mean, the Insurrection Act is really, really broad. And it neutralizes many of the constitutional protections against abuse of power by an executive, by the president. And
so there wouldn't be any more state rights, and in effect, he can take over.
Or individual civil rights, even. Yeah. I share your concern, Vanola, and in my mind, that's how he wants it to play out. I also think that he's going to be messing with our elections in a year from November, although that's a ways down the road, but it's very, very concerning.
Right. I think so too. Well, thank you. I just wanted to know if I was going off the deep end or. Well,
if you are, I'm going there. I'm going with you. Spot on. Vanola, thank you. It's great to hear from you. Appreciate the call. Steve in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hey, Steve. Thanks for listening to WAUK. What's up?
Yeah. Hey, I'd just like to quickly educate you and your listeners regarding masks and ICE wearing them and all law enforcement. I got 20 years of it behind me, and almost every operation we did, we masked up. And that's for our safety, our fellow officers' safety, our acquaintances, our families. We didn't want to have to go to the next state to go to the grocery store. Now you have this fool
I've never seen a cop wear a mask.
No, listen, you've never been on raids, then, have you? So I'm not making this up, sir. We masked up all the time. And it's not because we're doing something wrong. It's because for our safety afterwards. I don't need someone coming into the grocery store or wherever I'm going when I'm off duty recognizing me, and then going after my family, going after my kids. Then again, you have this fool mayor in Nashville exposing these agents. That's crazy.
Steve, if you're doing nothing wrong, why are you afraid?
Are you not listening to me?
I am listening to you. I don't understand why, if you are a law enforcement officer and you're actually enforcing the law and you're doing it in a lawful fashion, you would be afraid of people knowing who you are. I would think you would be proud of yourself.
Let me explain to you, if you would listen. Okay, it's a very dangerous job. There's people who hate law enforcement. There's people who would love to dox us and go after us and kill us.
Hey, there's people who hate liberals. They are out there killing liberals right now. They're killing Democratic politicians. You don't see Democratic politicians running around wearing masks. People wear masks in totalitarian regimes. Steve, talking over me is not going to make your point. I'm happy to give you all the time you want to talk, but you can at least let me. Oh, Jesus. Tom in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Guten Freitag, my friend.
Yeah, back at you. Wie geht's?
Yeah, I want to talk about something that's flown under the radar, and it really bothers me. By the end of May, pulling us out of USAID has killed 300,000 people in Africa.
At least.
200,000 of them are children. They let food rot rather than to send it to them.
Yeah.
They also refuse to send anti-diarrhea medicine, which kills, people in poor countries.
Yep.
300,000. That's
and in my mind, Tom, there's two reasons for this. Number one, USAID was the main force that overthrew apartheid in South Africa, and of course, that's Elon Musk's, thing is that his white people were treated badly. So he's wanted to take down USAID ever since he fled South Africa when apartheid fell, number one. And number two, Putin hates USAID because it turns countries toward America and away from Russia and China. And Putin is talking to Trump every 2 or 3 days, and there's no doubt in my mind that Putin told Trump, why are you wasting all that money on those black people in those poor countries?
Exactly. It is. Musk is from Afrikaner.
Yeah.
Racist apartheid thing. He sees black people as the enemy.
Yep. In my opinion.
The African or black. I mean, Tom, over 250,000. These are Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot sort of numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awful. It's flown under the radar, and they let that food rot.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
My God.
I get it. Tom, thanks. Good rant. Charlene in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Hey, Charlene, what's up?
Hello, how are you?
I am fine.
I want to talk about DEI that Trump is using as a smokescreen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's not racist in itself, but he's using it as a ploy to defraud white America in general. He says that he got rid of air traffic controllers because of DEI. There's not that many black or minority or women in air traffic control.
But the few who were there, apparently he got rid of.
The few who were there. And he got rid of many of them, and most of them were Caucasian males.
Mm.
He said that when getting rid of federal workers, and most of them, some of them were even Trump supporters that voted for him.
Yeah. The thing is that there's a larger proportion of black people in the federal workforce than in any other workforce in America outside of, like civil rights groups and things like that. And
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why is because ever since the 60s, the federal government has been aggressively pursuing colorblind hiring policies. So, there's a larger percentage of black people who work as federal bureaucrats, who work in the federal bureaucracy, than in any company in America. Or they draw those from the ranks of pilots, and most of your pilots are white men.
Right, that's what I thought. But yeah, you probably are right about the federal workers.
Yep.
I'm not going to say you're not right about that.
No, I know
but
I'm right
about that.
I just
thought he was. Yeah, I don't mean it that way. I know you're right about that.
I get
it. Okay, but thank you for answering my question. And I do think he's doing things a lot more for show. because Obama got rid of, 69,000 immigrants quietly, while Trump has got rid of almost the same, but being very vocal and loud about it. And I think he does things just to keep his base.
I think that's part of it, Charlene. A larger part of it that we can't overlook, which is not to excuse Trump or anything like that, is that the deportation numbers for Obama include people who were stopped at the border and turned back. And that was probably more than half of the total number of people that Obama deported. I've never seen a good, clean analysis of it, but the ones that I have seen kind of suggest that it was at least half, maybe more. And people just aren't showing up at the border anymore since Trump came in. I mean, he's, whenever you have a Democrat in the White House, you've got this huge message machine of all the Republicans in Congress and all the right-wing media yelling and screaming that the Democrat has opened the border wide open. Even though, Obama never did that and Biden never did that. But what it does is it causes millions, literally millions of people from south of our border to think the border's open. And so they come up and, try to get through. And so they get caught and they get deported. And so you've got these high deportation numbers, particularly for Obama, because the Republicans were basically inviting people here. And then when you get a Republican president, like Donald Trump, in both terms, frankly, you see the number of people showing up at the border drop because, you no longer have Republicans yelling it's wide open, even though nothing has changed. And so, that's why Obama's numbers are so much higher, frankly.
Oh, very crafty. Thank you. I love your show. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Charlene. I appreciate your kind words, and thank you for the call. You too. It's 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Gustavo in Thousand Oaks, California. Hey, Gustavo, what's on your...
Thank you, first of all, for taking my phone call. I have a quick question. I would like to see what you think about manifest destiny. Do you think that manifest destiny has been a push factor, especially Latin America, for people come to the United States? And do you think that if we were to stop, implementing the way the United States implementing their foreign affairs in Latin American countries, do you think this would definitely stop migration, coming north?
Yeah.
I'll give you a brief example. I'm from Mexico, and back in 1994, my father was producing a lot of cattle, and because NAFTA came in, my father lost nearly everything. So we had nothing else to live off, and my father couldn't compete with NAFTA, so, he had to let go all his employees, and we all migrated to the United States. So I wanted to hear from you if you think, manifest destiny and the way we are doing, our foreign affairs in Latin American countries has anything to do with this massive migration to the north.
Right. Well, let me first offer the caveat that I am no scholar. I've never, seriously researched it, but I did take, high school history and those kind of things. My understanding of the argument of manifest destiny, which was, the Catholic churches and several European countries' big thing back in the 1400s, and then was used to justify the murder of Native Americans and the theft of lands and even slavery, was that if something has happened, in all probability, that's God's will. In other words, it's the manifestation of the destiny that was established before the world was even created, to paraphrase, I think it's the book of John. And so therefore this must be the way it is. So if white people came to this continent and killed lots and lots of Native Americans, that must be God's will, because it happened, because it was successful, and because it lasted for years and years and years. So I would argue, Gustavo, I don't know about the points that you made, but I would argue that the modern day white male Christian nationalist worldview that's reflected now in the GOP, that white straight men should be in charge of everything, is just the modern version of manifest destiny. That, white men have always been in charge, therefore they should always be in charge going forward. What do you think?
Okay. That makes sense. That makes lots of sense.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the way we are implementing foreign affairs in Latin American countries? Do you think that's also a push factor that people are, there's no jobs and they're not making any money and they're like, well, what do we do?
There's two, I think there's, pardon the interruption, but we're going to hit a break here in just a second. I think there are two factors. Number one, Reagan just totally screwed up the region in Central America, politically, and we're still suffering from that. And two, you've got a horrible global climate change situation. Large parts of Guatemala in particular have been deforested. They're turning into desert. Farmland can't grow things on it anymore because of global warming, and that's producing refugees. Gustavo, I got to run. Thanks for the call. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. It's the shocking truth about hairdryer economics and climate change. Donald Trump recently came out with this just absolutely absurd statement. He said, they want everybody to have an electric car. We don't have enough electricity. We couldn't make enough electricity for that. Well, let's just look at the facts. Charging your electric car with the charger that typically comes with it, you plug it into a 110-volt outlet, pulls about 10 amps. That's about the same as a hairdryer. So if everybody in America just ran a hairdryer for a couple hours every night, or anytime during the day, do you think that that's going to bring down the power grid? No, this is absurd. It's also why it only costs, running an electric car, powering an electric car is about the equivalent of $1 a gallon gasoline. Obviously it depends on the car. But there's a whole great rant with all the details and charts and graphs and everything else. It's over at HartmannReport.com. It's called The Shocking Point About Hairdryer Economics and Climate Change. Check it out. Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Ron in Hamilton Field, California. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Well, I've been looking at FDA just put out a public comment period up to July 18th. The issue that they're saying is they want to have a reassessment on or an assessment on the chemicals in food products. Mm-hmm. And looking at it, I saw one little mention of accumulation of the chemicals. But I saw nothing on mother to child. Back a few decades back, I was involved with students, and we were looking at HIV prevention and testing, and the issues of the mother to child transmission of the effects of HIV and HIV in the child. Mm-hmm. Now, U.S. aid that was cut off, and we don't know how many children may be dying now from HIV. But the issue of chemicals in food and the bioaccumulation in the mothers and the transgenerational effect in offspring also would include the effects of what you find in mother's breast milk. They proven dioxins, other fatty tissues, glyphosate, and it's in mother's milk. Now, with the report that came out from MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, it states that 40% of the children from the birth to the age of 17 have a chronic disease of some sort or another.
Right.
Now, where the transmission from mother to child and all the environmental things in the food, in the prospect of mother's milk, and in that child, where is it that we have real regulations that cut it out? When you have low levels of toxins, known toxins, with the intent and put them into products. And you don't account for the continued use of that product. You're not accounting for the buildup and bioaccumulation and potential transfer to the next generation. We have actually put in place a domino generations to come from the food products that basically the chemicals in those food products that the fossil fuel industry, the chemical industry, and all the byproducts of them are actually poisoning not us alone, but the future generations that we have because of the dollar value of the income to those people from the fossil fuel industry all the way to your table.
I agree with you, Ron. I would add something to that. In fact, 2 points. The first is that we don't have the precautionary principle they do in Europe. So we've got 80,000 untested chemicals right now in our environment and food supply, whereas in Europe, before you can introduce a new chemical into the environment or into the food supply that might affect humans, you have to first prove it's safe. That's not the case here in the United States. We wait until things are proven to be deadly and then we pull them. So we've got BPA and PFAS and all these other chemicals that just are not even in use in Europe, number one. Number two, another big problem, and I did a fair amount of research on this about 15, 20 years ago when I wrote the book Threshold. There's a whole chapter in there about this, is the hygiene hypothesis. Most of that, 40% of kids have a chronic disease. The vast majority of those chronic diseases are asthma. And asthma and other autoimmune diseases like plaque psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, these are autoimmune diseases. These are where the body's immune system attacks the body. And there's a huge body of evidence. And by the way, these have exploded since the 1950s. Well, what happened since the 1950s? Our hygiene got a lot better. We got a lot better at not, in other words, we don't have intestinal parasites any longer. We coexisted, we co-evolved with intestinal parasites, pinworms, hookworms, roundworms, things like that. And in fact, I remember when I was a little kid in elementary school, we had a pinworm infestation that went around our class, and everybody had an itchy butt, from pinworms, and we all had to take a drug to knock them out. But these were extremely common. I mean, talk to old people, you will find everybody had parasites when they were little. That just doesn't happen. And it turns out that these parasites have on the outside of the skin of the parasite itself, they produce chemicals that downregulate our immune systems so we don't reject them. So our immune systems normally run hotter than they should, and they're downregulated by the parasites that we literally co-evolved with. All indigenous people have these parasites. Same is true of pets, and that's why you're seeing these same kinds of arthritic and allergy conditions popping up in pets, because they don't have parasites. And so that's why you've got all these drugs that are being advertised on TV that are immune suppressants. They're simply imitating parasites. So part of the problem is that we've just gotten too clean. The solution is kind of grody, let people have worms. but there you go. There's actually, like I said, there's some just amazing research on this and some pretty good websites on it. Ron, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Sorry if I ruined your breakfast there. We'll be back with more of Anything Goes Weekend right after the break.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book today for the Thom Hartmann Book Club is A Woman of No Importance, The Untold Story of the American Spy Who Win World War II by Sonia Purnell. This is from the prologue. France was falling. Burned-out cars, once strapped high with treasured possessions, were nosed crazily into ditches. Their beloved cargoes of dolls, clocks, and mirrors lay smashed around them and along mile upon mile of unfriendly road. Their owners, young and old, sprawled across the hot dust and were groaning or already silent. Yet the hordes just kept streaming past them, a never-ending line of hunger and exhaustion, too fearful to stop for days on end. 10 million women, children, and old men were on the move, all fleeing Hitler's ranks, pouring across the border from the east and the north. Entire cities had uprooted themselves in a futile bid to escape the Nazi blitzkrieg of them. The fevered talk was of German soldiers stripped to the waist in jubilation at the ease of their conquest. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of the dead. The babies had no milk, and the aged fell where they stood. The hordes drawing overladen old farm carts sagged and snarled in their sweat-drenched agony. The French heat wave of May 1940 was witness to this, the largest refugee exodus of all time. Day after day, a solitary moving vehicle weaved its way through the crowd with a striking young woman at the wheel. Private Virginia Hall often ran low on fuel and medicines, but still pressed on in her French Army ambulance toward the advancing enemy. She persevered even when the German Stukas came screaming down to drop 110-pound bombs onto the convoys all around her, torching the cars and cratering the roads. Even when fighter planes swept over the treetops to machine gun the ditches where women and children were trying to take cover from the carnage. Even though French soldiers were deserting their units, abandoning their weapons and running away, some in their tanks. Even when her left hip was shot with pain from continually pressing down on the clutch with her prosthetic foot. Now, at the age of 34, her mission marked the turning point after years of cruel rejection. For her own sake, as much as for the casualties she was picking up from the battlefields and ferrying to the hospital, she could not fail again. There were many reasons why she was willingly jeopardizing her life far from home in aid of a foreign country when millions of others were giving up. Perhaps foremost among them was that it had been so long since she had felt so thrillingly alive. Disgusted with the cowardice of the deserters, she could not understand why they would not continue the fight. But then she had little to lose. The French still remembered sacrificing a third of their young menfolk to the Great War, and a nation of widows and orphans were in no mood for more bloodshed. Virginia, though, intended to go on the road, wherever the battle took her. She was prepared to face down any dangers. Total war against the Third Reich might perversely offer her one last hope of personal peace. Yet even this was as nothing compared with what was to come in a life that drew out into a Homeric tale of adventure, action, and seemingly unfathomable courage. Virginia Hall's service in the France of summer 1940 was merely an apprenticeship for a near-suicide mission against the tyranny of the Nazis and their puppeteers in France. She helped to pioneer a daredevil role in espionage, sabotage, and subversion behind enemy lines in an era when women barely featured in the prism of heroism, when their part in combat was confined to the supportive and the palliative, when they were just expected to look nice and act obedient and let the men do the heavy lifting, when disabled women or men were confined to staying at home and leading often narrow, unsatisfying lives. The fact that a young woman who had lost her leg in tragic circumstances broke through the tightest constrictions and overcame prejudice and even hostility to help the Allies win the Second World War is astonishing. That a female guerrilla leader of her stature remains so little known to this day is incredible. Yet that is perhaps how Virginia would have wanted it. She operated in the shadows, and that was where she was happiest, even to her closest allies in France. She seemed to have no home or family or regiment, merely a burning desire to defeat the Nazis. They knew neither her real name nor her nationality, nor how she had arrived in their midst. Constantly changing in looks and demeanor, surfacing without notice across whole swaths of France, only to disappear again as suddenly, she remained an enigma throughout the war, and in some ways after it, too. Even now, 3 solid years of detective work, taking me from the National Archives in London, the resistance files in Lyon, and the parachute drop zones in the Haute-Loire, to the judicial dossiers of Paris and even the white marble corridors of CIA headquarters at Langley. My search led me through 9 levels of security clearance into the heart of today's world of American espionage. I have discussed the pressures of operating in enemy territory with a former member of Britain's special services and ex-intelligence officers from both sides of the Atlantic. I've tracked down files that were missing and discovered that others remain mysteriously lost or unaccounted for. I have spent days drawing diagrams matching dozens of code names with scores of her missions, months hunting for remaining extracts of these strange disappeared papers, years digging out forgotten documents and memoirs. The book A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the third hour of our program. Researchers say that the Health and Human Services vaccine memo, this is Bob Kennedy's work, him and his anti-vax crackpots, twisted their data. The actual scientists who produced data that is being cited by our Department of Health and Human Services to justify not giving the COVID vaccine to pregnant women, well, to anybody, frankly, except people over 65, is full of BS. Kaiser Health News, the KFF Health News, used to be called the Kaiser Family Foundation. Now they call it KFF. And they've got this publication called KFF Health News. They just published this remarkable analysis of this memo that the Department of Health and Human Services shared with Congress, sent to Congress. So here we have the health branch of the federal government reaching out to and lying to Congress in the hopes that they will enact legislation or approve what they're doing or whatever about public health issues. Here's a couple of examples. The memo that Bob Kennedy's boys and girls sent to Congress says, and I quote, "A number of studies in pregnant women showed higher rates of fetal loss if vaccination was received before 20 weeks of pregnancy." They're talking about the COVID vaccine. And then the footnote referenced a 2024 study of 246,000 Canadian women that was published in a peer-reviewed journal, Obstetrics and Gynecology, the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So they reached out to Dr. Maria Velez, who is the Associate Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at McGill University, who was the lead author of the study, and said, does your study comport with this assertion by Bob Kennedy and his friends that if women get a COVID-19 vaccine within 20 weeks of pregnancy, that they're going to have a higher rate of fetal loss, of miscarriage? And she said, and I quote, "The HHS document misinterpreted our study results. On the contrary, our study provides evidence to inform policymakers, healthcare providers, pregnant women, and those considering a pregnancy about the safety of vaccine in relation to miscarriage risk. What their study found was that there was no danger in getting the shot. In fact, there's a considerable danger in not getting the shot, because if you're pregnant and you get COVID, it can cause miscarriage. So it's the exact opposite of what Bob Kennedy and his boys are saying. Here's another part of the memo. Yet another study showed an increase in placental blood clotting in pregnant mothers who took the vaccine. Once again, this study has this is based on the research that they cite to back the claim, is a study of COVID vaccine that included 99 million people. It was published in the journal Vaccine in February of last year. And as NewsGuard writes, the study, quote, contains no such data. They just made this crap up. They pulled it out of their backside. They invented it out of thin air. So then NewsGuard again reached out to the researcher who co-authored the study. This is from Denmark's Statens Serum Institute. And it is the co-author of the study, Anders Hvid, who said, and I quote, "Our study does not even look at a cohort of pregnant women, and we don't include placental blood clotting as an outcome." Once again, Bob Kennedy and his guys are just making crap up. In fact, they point out NewsGuard has, NewsGuard, by the way, NewsGuardRealityCheck.com is the website. They've got a great Substack newsletter that is really worth subscribing to. We should probably get them on the air here regularly, because they just have these shocking debunkings of right-wing talking points, and lately they've been going after this in ways that are just amazing. But they point out that they've got this thing called the RFK Jr. Healthcare Claims Depository, and they say we have documented 106 provably false claims, health claims, advanced by Kennedy and the anti-vaccine nonprofit he funded, Children's Health Defense. It's incredible. Speaking of COVID, there is a new COVID variant. It's NB.1.8.1. It's referred to as Nimbus by scientists. This is it evolved out of Omicron, which evolved out of something before that, which evolved out of the original COVID virus. And it's got a new nickname. It's called razor blade throat, or the new throat COVID. Now, the good news is it's not any deadlier than previous COVIDs, although I think it's important to remember that 300 people a week are still dying in America from COVID. My best friend died from COVID just last year, and he was fully vaccinated, multiple vaccines. So, and he was a healthy guy. In fact, he had just come back from the gym. But COVID is still deadly. So, number one. But nonetheless, this new Nimbus or razor blade throat variant, the NB1.8.1, includes the principal characteristic of it is that your throat, it just feels like it has razor blades in it. It's just insanely sore. It also has the symptoms of all the other COVID viruses: fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath, loss of taste or smell, and the possibility of heart attack and stroke. The new variant had reached nearly 11% of sequence samples reported globally, so it's huge. And that was in mid-May, by the way. That was a month ago. And they note airport screening in the United States detected the new variant in travelers arriving from those regions. They're talking about the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, and the Western Pacific, which is where it's endemic now. Airport screening in the United States detected this new variant in travelers arriving from those regions to destinations in California, Washington State, Virginia, and New York. So these are, of course, major ports, places where people come in from other parts of the world. And then they note COVID-19 vaccines are effective against the Nimbus variant, or the razor blade throat variant. Louise got her booster shot this week. Somehow we got about a month off, and so I haven't hit the 6-month mark yet. And she just did, and so she just went out and got her shot on Tuesday or Wednesday. And, sore arm for a day, and that's about the end of it. But bottom line here, science says and so do I. If you're more than 6 months out and you're over 65, get your booster. And frankly, if you're under 65, I mean, you want to at least get an annual shot. I don't know if your doctor or your pharmacy will let you get them more than once a year, but be sure that you're getting an annual shot, because this disease is still killing people. It's still hospitalizing people. Granted, most of them are people who are unvaccinated. They're Trump pumpers and fanatic Republicans. Still, like I said, my best friend died of COVID, and he was well vaccinated. So let's pick up some calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Mary in North Hollywood. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I want to thank you for having the huevos to keep speaking the truth. I live in Los Angeles, and I am just so furious I could spit about what's going on here. I just want to say that I fully believe this entire situation is a Trump manufacture, and that he can hardly wait till there is some real violence. And if there isn't by the people that are protesting, he's going to have it happen. And that I do believe that the violence so far is agent provocateurs.
I think there's probably some small bit of that, but yeah, I completely agree. Trump wants violence. That's why he's invading these cities.
Right. And the one thing, though, that was in the news this morning that a lot of people may have missed, and that was they were talking about this incident at the Dodger Stadium where protesters and then the Dodgers declined to let, quote unquote, ICE enter their parking lot. Okay. Right. Then subsequently, I don't know if it was the news or Dodgers probably received a message from an ICE representative saying, false, we weren't there. So then my question is, are these thugs going around with masks, refusing to identify themselves, snatching people and taking them away to who knows where?
It does raise an interesting question. We know of at least 3 well-publicized incidents where people claiming to be ICE officers, in one case, raped a woman, threatened her and then raped her. In another case, broke into a home and robbed them. And in another case, beat a man to within an inch of his life. And at first, everybody thought they were actual ICE officers because that's how they were. They had the masks on and they were out of uniform, but they kind of looked like, tough guy cops.
I think they are bounty hunters being paid by somebody.
Well, that's the latest story, is that ICE is hiring bounty hunters now. And they're putting a bounty on people. So it may well be, Mary, or it could just be that ICE is lying. I mean, they have apparently quite a history of doing that. Mary, thank you for the call. This is a big question. What's actually going on? And if they wanted to get into Dodger Stadium, why don't they just buy a damn ticket? I don't get it. It's 17 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Speaking the truth, ICE would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Joel in Seattle. Hey, Joel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I have an issue and a real quick fun suggestion. This crypto vault, and I really think it's a setup for the greatest heist in human history. I mean, they've clawed back all this cash, which is our money. Are you listening, MAGA? Our money. And they will force a sale of their volatile and unsupported bit garbage to us and walk away with our money.
Oh, you're talking about Trump and the Republican proposal
the crypto vault.
To build a crypto strategic reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Where's the money going to come to buy the bit stuff? It's going to come from this clawback pile that they've got.
That's right. It'll be our tax dollars that they're going to use to buy Bitcoin that has been created by Donald Trump's sons.
Well, not just that. How much you want to bet this Dogecoin? We know who's supporting that.
Yep.
I bet you there's going to be a whole pot, like a poker pot, being put in.
Yep, I agree.
And I don't want to get super cynical, but when you have something so unsupported and volatile, I mean, the risk of collapse is high.
And it's not a currency, it's a commodity.
It's a commodity, and that means that could literally lead to a collapse of the global economy.
I agree. It could be the Dutch tulip bulbs all over.
Right. Do they care or not? I mean, think about it. I won't say the name of the family member who whispered into Hoover's ear because I don't know if we have any facts that it was actually said, but, let it fall and we'll buy it all. I mean, I worry that that's what this ultra elite internationally
you're talking about Herbert Hoover.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Remember when his friend, rhymes with a large round fruit, whispered, let it fall and we'll buy it all.
Remind me, Joel. It's okay. You can say a name. What was it?
Mellon.
Oh, that's right. And Mellon was the Secretary of the Treasury. Yeah, and he also said, what was the phrase? It wasn't burn it all, but it was like, let it all crash and we'll clean up the debris afterwards. I mean, that wasn't his phrase.
Right.
But
I was paraphrasing.
That was the meaning of it.
Yeah. I was paraphrasing with the rhyme.
Yeah.
Hey, which leads to my suggestion. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun to let some of us listeners, such as myself, submit our protest songs we recorded in studios, and you could DJ the ones you pick for the last hour on a Friday for fun.
I started out as a DJ, and so did Sean. And
I know.
And we've often talked about that. The problem that we have is that, and I just got an email this morning from somebody saying, here's a song, I'd love you to play it on the radio. And the problem is that, a meaningful chunk of our revenue comes from online services that carry this program and pay us.
Right.
YouTube, Facebook, things like that, Twitter.
Right.
And all of them are filled with these robotic copyright trolls. So if I play a song or even a clip that has ever appeared anywhere, when I play a clip of somebody else's news show or somebody saying something in the news or something, bang, we get hit with a copyright thing and they strip us of all of our revenue for the day. And that's what's paying for Nate's salary right now. So I just can't take the chance. If your song or anybody else's song has ever played anywhere, that's why we went to AI. I mean, we really had no choice. So unfortunately, I can't do that, Joel. I wish I could. I wish this was just old-fashioned radio, where you could play real songs as bumpers and things. Yeah. But it's not. It's not. We live in a whole different new world. Joel, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Great to hear from you. 21 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls here. It's Anything Goes Weekend. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. They called it blood libel, what the Germans were doing against the Jews, claiming that they were using the blood of Christian children to make their matzah. We've got a new blood libel now here in the United States. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump lying through their teeth, arguing black Haitian immigrants to the United States, legal immigrants with green cards in this little town in Ohio, are eating pets. And this is another libel that goes way back. In the 1890s, people were claiming German and Dutch immigrants were eating pets. Then they claimed in the 1880s, and actually as recently as last year, a restaurant got shut down in California because of claims that they were serving pets. They weren't. It was an Asian restaurant. This is just evil stuff, these lies and spreading this kind of hate. This is now the strategy that the Republicans are using. There's a whole article about it at HartmannReport.com, Hate as a Political Weapon. Check it out.
They dream of kings in mansions high, ruling from the screens, rewriting laws, erasing rights, dictating human dreams. Their towers hum with hollow words, machines that watch and track a future cold and lifeless unless we take it back. They whisper in the boardrooms, plot behind closed doors, a kingdom for the chosen few, the rest abandoned poor. They sell us chains and silver words, call the cage a throne, but we see through their empty lies, we won't be overthrown. The dark enlightenment is rising, but we're rising. just the few. We are millions, we are thunder, we will break the spell. If we stand and fight together, they can drag us into hell.
23 minutes past the hour. Lyrics courtesy of Louise. Picking up your calls here, Nancy in Springfield, Oregon. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I get very upset about, this Palestinian-Israeli thing. Nobody ever talks about how this whole thing got started. And in 48 and 49, when the Zionists came to Israel, they terrorized the Palestinians who were, already here, living here. They terrorized them and, in some cases killed them and, kicked them off their land. And a lot of them ended up in Gaza. And we don't talk about how these people got here. And it's been like 75 years that the Palestinians have wanted to go back to their homeland, which was the land that the Israelis kicked them off of. And nobody knows about that, it seems like. It just seems like,
I think most people understand that. Just like you and I are living on land that our ancestors stole from Native Americans, Nancy.
Yeah, but that is why I think the Palestinians, quote, terrorize the Israelis, but the Israelis do a lot more terrorizing of the Palestinians than
it's certainly run both ways, but that part of the story is now kind of officially, like I said, just like the land that you and I are living on, water under the bridge. Well, I'm far more concerned with the fact that Netanyahu for years gave billions of dollars to Hamas in Gaza and supported them, and apparently looked away as he was being warned by his own intelligence services and intelligence services around the world that the October 7th attack was coming. Pulled away, apparently, the army and the I mean, it took them, 7-8 hours to get anybody there after this attack. It looks to me, there's still all these conspiracy theories that the Nazis actually transported Marius von der Lubbe through the tunnels underneath the Reichstag and helped him set the building on fire, so that Hitler could declare a state of national emergency. Those same kind of conspiracy theories are now bouncing around Israel among anti-Netanyahu people and appearing in respectable publications like Haaretz and have even been discussed in the Jerusalem Post, that either Netanyahu had a massive intelligence failure or he was welcoming some sort of a crisis, maybe not anything as bad as what happened on October 7th, and that he has used that now as an excuse to commit just a slaughter. And in a way that is designed to keep him in power. I think that if we keep our focus on what, the horrors of what's going on right now, that will have much more impact and be much more successful in winning an argument than in going back to 1947. Nancy, I got to run, but thanks for the call. It's 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Talk media for the rest of us. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I think it's also important to note that the appearance of Israel, the modern Israel, was also a result of the Holocaust.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Vince Houghton's Nuking the Moon and Other Intelligence Schemes and Military Plots Left on the Drawing Board. This is Chapter 7, Operation Northwoods. On April 17, 1961, more than 1,400 Cuban exiles forming the Brigada de Asalto 6 landed on the beaches of Cuba at Playa Girón in the Bahia de Cojinos, the Bay of Pigs. The regime of Fidel Castro, Cuba's increasingly communist leader, who had himself overthrown the regime of American ally Batista just 2 years before. A communist leader just 90 miles from Key West was a rather painful thorn in the side of the newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy, and his ouster was considered a high national security priority, as it had been for Kennedy's predecessor, Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion was backed by the U.S. government and the CIA. We can argue why the Bay of Pigs invasion failed until we're blue in the face, and many people still do. For many, the Cuban exile because JFK refused to give American naval and air support, elements called in for the original plan developed by the Eisenhower administration. Maybe this is true. The problem here is that we begin to descend into the realm of the counterfactuals, the if-onlys and what-ifs, things that we are doing our damnedest to avoid. Look, I've met a lot of the Cubans who took part in that invasion, many of whom are permanently settled in or around Miami, my hometown. They are impressive men, and I wouldn't put anything past them. If they say they could have kicked out Castro with U.S. naval and air support, who am I to argue? But I still will, because things are much more complicated from an intelligence perspective. Despite the lack of air and naval support, and despite the intensity and desire of the Cuban exile forces, it would have been immeasurably difficult to overcome one of the most problematic aspects of the entire invasion. Castro not only knew they were coming, he knew when and where they were coming. A combination of piss-poor information security, or in today's parlance, InfoSec, with the ability of Cuban intelligence to infiltrate the Miami exile community meant that the secret mission to free Cuba of Castro was anything but secret. It's not like this was a huge surprise for the CIA or the U.S. military. The Cuban intelligence service was very good, and some in the exile community had loose lips. It's nearly impossible to conduct effective counterintelligence and keep the invasion secret. Most telling of all, the Soviets had literally broadcast their knowledge of the mission 4 days before it happened. On April 13th, Radio Moscow released an English-language newscast in which they predicted an invasion of Cuba by CIA-trained exiles within the week. It seems they were trying to warn us against carrying out the invasion, a type of deterrent propaganda. Hey, we know you're coming, so perhaps now is not a good time for your secret operation. Clearly, that didn't work. The blowback from the failed mission was significant on multiple levels. More than 100 members of the 2506 Brigade were killed in combat, along with 4 American volunteer pilots from the Alabama Air National Guard, who were contracted by the CIA. Hundreds more in Cuba would be executed in the days and weeks following the invasion, as Castro eliminated anyone suspected of abetting the exile. More than 1,200 of the brigade would be captured by the Cuban government, and some of those members were subsequently executed. The Kennedy administration was embarrassed by the failed mission. U.S. government looked inept and failing to maintain order even in its own backyard. In the zero-sum game of the Cold War, where victory for one of the superpowers was defeat for the other, this was a huge win for the Soviets. Not to mention that the invasion pushed Castro even more firmly into the Soviet sphere of influence. And as far as the strength of the regime was concerned, the Bay of Pigs invasion did the exact opposite of what was intended. It made Castro's regime more powerful than ever before. The operation was a great political victory for the Cubans at home and abroad. Castro was a hero in the eyes of his people for defeating the Yankee invasion and was able to consolidate his power. The fiasco also elevated the Cuban government to a newfound global status, transforming communist Cuba from a aggrieved little country to an equal in the eyes of the world. In fact, Argentinian physician turned Cuban revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara actually thanked the United States for the failed invasion. The CIA bore the brunt of the failed mission. President Kennedy fired CIA Director Allen Dulles, along with Deputy Director Charles Cabell and Deputy Director for Plans Richard M. Bissell, the 3 men who made up the core of the agency's leadership, particularly in the realm of covert action. Kennedy also removed, at least temporarily, major paramilitary operations from the purview of the CIA. For more than a decade, CIA had been the agency with primary responsibility for paramilitary covert operations, but now it was benched. Into the void left the U.S. military. In June 1961, about 2 months after the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy approved National Security Action Memoranda 55, 56, and 57, which codified the shift in paramilitary responsibility from the CIA to the Pentagon. Nothing else really changed. The U.S. government was still looking for ways to oust Castro from power, just through a different government agency. By autumn, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a legendary intelligence officer, or infamous, or both, depending on your perspective, was asked to brainstorm ideas to get rid of Fidel. He didn't disappoint. In February 1962, Lansdale provided a document titled Possible Actions to Provoke, Harass, or Disrupt Cuba. Some of the actions are pretty good, some are quite silly, and some are downright abhorrent. The book is Nuking the Moon by Vince Houghton.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. People in the Rust Belt states know all about tariffs. They know that tariffs kept jobs in the Rust Belt states for centuries, literally, that America was built on tariffs. It's one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected in 2016 was because he talked about tariffs. But for some reason right now, you know, the Harris-Walz campaign, or Democrats in general, are reluctant to talk about tariffs. They call them sales taxes or something like that. They really need to be a little more straightforward, because people, particularly in the industrial Midwest, or in the Rust Belt, as we call it now, are not dumb. You know, they know what's going on. They know where we've been and how we got here. And I think it's pretty important to be talking about tariffs and what they are, how they work, and how they can bring manufacturing back home. I wrote a piece about it for Hartmann Report. It's titled, "Why Trump is Wrong and Alexander Hamilton Was Right About Tariffs." And I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
Send the true mail, call it fraud, set the tail, purge the rolls or rig the count, make sure their votes don't amount. Whispered deals in hotel rooms, promises wrapped in doom, sabotage the peace they make, break the truth for power's sake. How to steal a country and get away with it, lie through your teeth while the ballots get ditched. Wave your flag and set it on fire, sell them war and call it desire. Stack the courts, silence the press, blame the poor, clean up the mess that you made with your billionaire friends. And do it again, and again, and again.
36 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Lawrence in Berkeley. Hey, Lawrence, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning. The No Kings demonstration in Oakland was huge and brilliant and peaceful and kind. But a lot of people are talking now about, what do you do with all those 5 million people that came to the demonstration? And my suggestion is that we can use those 5 million and more people to transform the Democratic Party, which we have to do in order to beat the Republicans. And what that means is that all the organizations that were involved in organizing No Kings, in the 50-51, all have to get together and form what you might call No Kings Democrats, and start nominating people to Congress, to state offices, to mayors, and at the same time running people for the local Democratic Party offices, so that we can eventually change the National Democratic Party. And we have to do that because the progressive positions, progressive Democratic positions, which the Republicans like to call communists, are in fact vastly popular with the population at large. Everybody wants to raise the minimum wage. Everybody wants, 70% of the population wants more unions. A vast majority want to tax the rich. And it's the 5 million people that showed up to No Kings who will outnumber the activists, the otherwise activists in the Democratic Party. And we need to take it over.
Yeah, I would love to see a reformation within the Democratic Party. It's why I was so aggressively pushing for Ben Wickler, the chairman of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, to become chairman of the DNC, the National Democratic Party. Ken Martin, seems to have just completely wimped out. I hope I'm wrong on this, but wow, I've not seen him out there. I've not seen, it's very concerning. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily the way to do it. My other big concern, Lawrence, is that the people who organized the No Kings rally and the hands-off one before it, the people at Indivisible and its coalition, they had their big phone conversation I think it was this last weekend or maybe Monday of this week. And they decided that they're going to do the next one on July 17th. And but I haven't seen or heard a single word about it in the mainstream media, which tells me or suggests to me that it may not be all that well attended, which causes me to worry that the Trump administration will think that the high water mark was the No Kings rally and that it's all downhill from there and people are losing interest and, hey, we can go on being fascists all we want because these guys just don't have the mojo. I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah.
Are you hearing about July 17th?
I do. I hear about it, but line all the time. But the thing is that, yes, we should do that. We need more demonstrations. But 5 million people, if you organize them and you get them on the phone and you get them on the computers.
Well, nobody signed up. You know, I mean, well, actually, yeah, a lot of people did sign up with Indivisible and with these organizations to say, yes, I'll be there. But
that's right, yeah.
But there was nobody taking names and addresses, and probably nobody would have signed if there were. At least at the protests that I went to. But I get what you're saying, Lawrence, and you know, keep thinking. I like the way you think, and you may be onto something. Thank you. Jim in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today? Jim in St. Louis?
I don't know what's wrong.
Watching Free Speech TV?
Call on your cell phone. And
okay, let's go to Timothy in East Berkshire, Vermont. Hey, Timothy, you're on the air. What's up?
Howdy, Tom. I'm rather taken aback by how casually people are discussing the possible scenario of nukes getting popped off. When Trump got elected this cycle, I'm like that son of a. He's going to do something really dumb, and now here he is with Netanyahu. And that whole thing. And what surprises me is that the media in Congress, we should have nuclear physicists.
Yep. He just dropped off the board. Lafayette in Foster City, California. Hey, Lafayette, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'd like to talk about the timeline for the extinction famine you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I think because of the methane clat rate release, it's going to happen within the next decade. And I'm going to use a non-rational timing.
That's the end of the world, you know. If the clat rates go,
the end of days,
we're cooked. I mean, literally.
Yeah. I'm using the book of Revelation, actually, for the timing. The fifth angel time period where the locusts, which cause famine, appear. They don't eat the grass. There could be a metaphor or allegory for global warming in cars. The eyes could be the headlights, the teeth could be the grill, the cab could be the crowns, and the scorpion tail could be the poison coming out of the tailpipe. They're also ruled over by a spirit that comes out of the bottomless pit, and it's named Apollyon, the god of ancient sunlight.
Whoa. I've read Revelation. I've never run across Apollyon. I've read Revelation 4 times.
Yeah. It's Abaddon, or the Greek word is Apollyon. And it's the same metaphor you used in your book, Ancient Sunlight for oil.
Right.
And there's a time period associated with it, 5 months, which could be 150 years in our time. And the internal combustion engine was 1877, so 2027 would be the period of the fifth angel, and the sixth angel is Armageddon.
Yeah.
And that would be...
Well, Lafayette, I hope you are wrong. The interpretation of Revelations has been a 2 millennia project, and it continues. Although since Rushdoony and the modern millennialists who kind of popped up in the late 19th century, it's taken a dark turn, and then it went really crazy with the whole Left Behind series and with Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth and all that. But I don't know. I can't go there, but I am concerned about the cloth rates. And there is, for people who don't know what we're talking about, go over to YouTube and just type in Hartmann DiCaprio and last hours. And there's a 11-minute little video that Leo DiCaprio and I put together a couple of years ago, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, about what happens when the methane cloth rates go. And I think you will find it and it's got some of the top scientists in the world in it. I think you'll find it fascinating. Lafayette, thank you very much for the call. Bob in Melbourne, Florida. Hey, Bob, thanks for listening to WMNF. What's up?
As always, I was thinking about Melania, and it dawned on me that maybe Melania is just another immigrant that's doing a job that most Americans just don't want to do.
I've seen that poster. Yes.
Hey, I would bring up the fact that my wife is a naturalized citizen, wasn't born in America. She had to take a test.
Yep.
To prove that she knew enough about, civics and the Constitution, American law and history and all that other kind of stuff. And then they give her, she's a citizen, she can vote.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking they should just make that universal, that everybody's got to take this test. And then I got a feeling that a lot of these guys driving around their pick-em-up trucks with the Trump sticker on their bumper, they ain't going to show up at the polls because they can't pass that test.
Well, you're assuming that the test is going to be unbiased. This is the problem with, anytime somebody says, let's just have everybody do this, or let's require this before politicians can get into politics. What happens when Donald Trump rewrites the test?
I know.
But what we should do, to your point, Bob, what we should do is we should be teaching civics in our damn schools.
How about that?
So,
I took civics. I'm 75 years old. I took civics growing up, and a lot of my grandkids don't take civics.
No, we had to memorize the preamble of the Constitution in the 3rd or 4th grade. I mean, we had to memorize the Gettysburg Address in the 4th or 5th grade. We knew the 3 branches of government, and then Reagan came in the 80s with
I know all
that was the end of that.
There.
Bob, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Great point. And yeah, Melania is doing a job no other American would do.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the True People's Media. Picking up your calls. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back, Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I don't know if you know or not, but our dear friend John Robbins, the founder of EarthSafe, just recently passed away. And I wanted to say that for your previous callers that were talking about all the chemicals in the environment, that all the pesticides and herbicides and chemicals that we dump in the environment, they accumulate in the tissue of the animals that people eat, and which contributes to many types of cancers.
I agree.
And also, it also contributes to heart disease, which is the #1 killer, and inflammatory diseases. And so adopting a plant-based diet is probably the best thing people can do for the planet and for their health.
That's right. And in that, try to eat organic.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And also, when people are concerned about crops that are sprayed with chemicals, plants have the properties, they have fiber, and fiber has the ability to absorb toxins in the body and dispose of them. So
that's correct.
Something that animal foods don't have.
Yeah, Louise was.
Anyway, I just want.
Louise was sharing some research that she just came across that found that if you eat 1.5 cups of black beans or chickpeas every week, it will reduce your cholesterol through that same mechanism, Alfredo, that you're talking about. The fiber, and the fiber is also food for the positive gut bacteria, which regulates your mood. So all kinds of good benefits. Eat your beans.
Yes, absolutely. And if you could in the future, I don't know if you can, but John Robbins' first book, Diet for a New America, is a great source of information regarding all of these things that are happening to the environment when we eat animals.
It really is. It really is. And he gets into animal agriculture in a big way. Thank you, Alfredo. That's great. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks for another great week of programs, Tom. It's been really cool hearing people
talk about their experiences at the No Kings rallies. And, I share a concern about July 17th also because it's on a Thursday. So we really have to get the word out.
Oh, maybe it's, is it the 17th or maybe it's the 19th? Am I misremembering?
No, I think it's scheduled for the 17th, which is a Thursday. So we'll see.
Why did they pick that day?
I think because John Lewis is the 5-year anniversary of his death, I think.
That's right.
But, but in regards to last week, I really recommend people looking at Rachel Maddow's Blue Sky account, scrolling through all the video clips and photos she posted from the marches last Saturday. Mm-hmm. It really was everyone, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah.
And my response to your Hartmann report today, Tom, is can someone name one thing Trump has done that hasn't gone into destroying either the environment, the economy, civil liberties, or post-Jim Crow American democracy as we know it? And furthermore, Tom, do you see any differences between what's going on here and the early stages of Italian and German fascism in the 30s? And before you answer that, Tom, it looks like Zoran Mamdani, he's got both the billionaire class and the establishment Dems running scared. So people in New York City got to get out and vote and don't put Cuomo on the ranked choice ballot.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Jeff, thank you. No, I can't name anything that Donald Trump has done that hasn't reversed our slide toward fascism. In fact, he's aggressively pushing it, as you well know. Thank you, Jeff. 10 minutes before the hour. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmannreport.com. Check it out. And welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, they had 200 people on the bridge over the Wisconsin River here in Sauk City that for the No Kings. And
well
every
done,
time
Mark.
I just signed up and went there, and it was nice. But it annoys me every time Kayleigh McEnany talks about how brave Donald Trump was, and talking about taking down ISIS, because it was the Kurds that did that for us, helped do that,
right.
Taking down ISIS.
And then we betrayed those same Kurds.
So those same Kurds. And the song that occurred to me this morning, as it has in the past, is a song I learned in grade school, Die Gedanken sind frei, the German socialist song that ends up, giving my thoughts give me power. Mm-hmm. There's a line in there: tyrants may take me and throw me in prison. My thoughts will burst forth like blossoms in season. And it goes on from there. The Pete Seeger version, I think, is what we learned. And it's a song about standing up. You got to think for yourself, and you don't cater your thoughts to dukes or dictators.
There you go.
I mean, it's a wonderful song, and it's probably too woke for what Republicans are thinking today. Probably another banned song that they don't want to hear.
There you go. Mark, thank you, and thanks for pointing out the true history of ISIS too. That's an important one. Judy in Chicago. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind?
Hi. Yeah.
Hey.
First of all, somebody called about ICE, and I had read where, like right after the election, that they had a call for bounty hunters to join ICE, and they would get $1,000 to $1,500 this person that they brought in.
Right.
Also,
I have read that also. I've not seen it in, like, you know, a mainstream, credible mainstream news source, but I've seen it all over social media.
Right. Well, it's not like they're going to say the real news on the media. But, and then in the House Oversight Committee, that ICE people are getting $42,000 bonuses.
Yeah, they're getting huge bonuses.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the exact amount, but I know they're getting huge bonuses.
But my big concern is about the election. Everybody does at the midterms. Have you been talking about that election?
Judy, your phone is falling apart. I can't understand what you're saying.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm going to have to move along, but thank you. Robin in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm calling in from Kingston, Washington, the home of civil informationing. A couple of years ago, I called in and I identified a group of people who I think are somewhat responsible for kind of falling asleep after the 60s and the 70s, and I called them the greatest gray nappers. Slowly but surely, a lot of us fell asleep. But there's also another group which a woman called in this morning, and also includes you and me and a whole bunch of other great people, and they are called the Great Grays. And I feel that the Great Grays or the greatest gray nappers are now waking up and they're becoming the Great Grays. Now, Tom, I've had this conversation with people, hundreds of people over the last years that I've been doing civil informationing, and I can't believe it, but I have not had one negative. When I say to them, I say, you know, I think people of our generation may have kind of nodded off and dozed a bit the last 30 to 40 to 50 years, because I think we're in this mess and we have a small part in it. So everyone agrees. Every person with the gray hair that I talk about agrees, Tom.
Yeah.
So I'm calling this is the celebration of the people who may have been napping and now are getting out in the streets.
I think we should revive the idea of wise elders, Robin.
I'm with it. Wise elders is fine. I say things to get attention. So it's kind of in a negative way.
Yeah.
But anyways, a lot of good things are happening, Tom. And I have a T-shirt that I wear that says, I stand with Roger Waters and Greta Thunberg. And that's designed to connect this older generation with the younger generation. And it is happening. And it is really wonderful. Tom.
There you go.
Thank you.
Robin, thank you.
Yep.
And thank you for being with us today. Special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jay LeBlanc, Jeremy Peterson, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verity, Martha Salinas, Mateo Robertson, Diane Russell, and Ruben Michaels, all the fine people who make this program possible and help make it work. And thank you to you for sharing the good word with your friends, neighbors, relatives about our program, and for reaching out to the stations that carry us. Get out there, get active, tag You're It, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch up with you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my source, share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.